Hey my students, how you doing? Hope you having good day. In this video, we are gonna see part of what if Deku has lag quirk. So what he gonna do in battle, the man with quirky powers, so watch till end. And subscribe for more, also like this video, it helps me to stay motivated. And don't forget to check it author of this story and show some love, name of this fanfic is. A precise note by Sir Lucifer Morningstar. Let jump in video. Professor Miyazaki adjusted his spectacles and dropped the chalk. Any individual discovered to possess a quirk of Keta 3 or higher will be closely observed by the government and, in some severe cases, as it was with Quasar's son, Supernova, deemed too dangerous to allow in human society. The lecturer reached over to touch his desk. Kubo et al. Argued in the quirk factor. Man's extinction by man's evolution about the ethicality of imprisoning individuals merely on the possibility of them utilizing their quirk to upheave society. Should we, as a society, continue to deprive individuals of their lives and freedom if it means guaranteeing the safety of our existence? To condemn innocent men, women and children to incarceration because of what they might do. A bell's ringing boom splintered through the classroom. We will be discussing the argument in our next lecture. Class dismissed. She zipped her books into her purse and gave a quiet controlled yawn. She strode through the lecture hall, managing to intercept the professor as he was wrapping up his belongings. Intelli-san. The monotone voice murmured. I take it you have some questions. My grade on the last assignment. I believe there must have been some error. She grabbed the paper and held it out for the professor to look over. There's no error here. This is an A-. Your highest grade in my class so far. You should be proud. I would rather you refrain from telling me what I should or should not feel, professor, and instead explain why you deemed my paper unworthy of a perfect grade. Miyazaki, the professor, shook his head. Intelli-san, you're my youngest student, the relevance of which being. You still have room to grow. Depriving me of my well-earned score without reason is meant for me to grow. Will you let me finish? The atmosphere seemed tense in a strange, impatient way. The older man mumbled something sharp under his breath. He looked at the board after clearing the mucus from his throat. Intelli-san, logic and rational thinking are excellent for several fields, but this the ethics and philosophy of quirks. A lot of your answers in my class are frankly, disturbingly unethical. They are unapologetically utilitarian in some instances and border on fanatically Machiavellian in others. I tackle the problems presented with suitable solutions, Professor. Professor Miyazaki pointed to the board and said, and I'm telling you that your solutions lack a shred of human empathy. In the case of subject Supernova, the prepubescent son of the villain Quasar whose quirk allowed him to create and detonate miniature stars. What would you argue as being the right thing to do rather than incarceration? Sedate and use him as a source of free energy. Acquire his sperm and impregnate women with complementary quirks and use these individuals as vehicles to advance human civilization. Did you miss where I stated that the boy is barely old enough to have started puberty? What is the life of one boy compared to the eventual prosperity of billions? And you wonder why you have an A- in my class. As she watched the professor leave the lecture hall, her lips were squeezed close together. She followed him with unwavering determination. Professor, I'm not quite sure I understand. Your reason for not giving me a perfect grade is because my arguments in your class are lacking in emotional predilections and unnecessary sentiment. Sentiment? Is that what you believe it is, to not exploit a child for the gain of others? Yes, Psycho replied. What else could it be? Miyazaki, the professor, sighed. He grew older, at least 3 times faster than before. With his right hand, he reached into his pocket and something appeared in his fingers, a cigarette. A lighter came next, not too long after. When the well-known cancer-causing stick landed in his mouth, all he could do was take a long, slow puff of smoke. I have another class, Intelli-san. As he went, the man ran out of things to say to her. She became even more convinced that the professor was simply another person giving lip service to the alleged goodness that exists in all people when he failed to respond to her. Although altruism is an essential evolutionary trait of society, it did not mean denying oneself benefits because of ideas about what one thought was right or good. Her phone twice beeped. She reached into her bag, took out the device, and read a message within. Midoriya. I've got it worked out. Psycho hero. Her brow furrowed. Psycho. Deciphered what? Midoriya. I installed the backdoor app on my phone. Midoriya. Please enter your number when I hand you my phone. You set up a backdoor application. That's how my discussion was intercepted by you. You found out that my mum and I had a fight because of that. She pursed her lips as she considered her answer. Psycho. That's correct. Psycho. You amaze me. Midoriya. That makes me happy. She gave a blink. Psycho. Are you okay? Midoriya. Do I have to be? Psycho. Most people would view what I did as a flagrant violation of their privacy. Midoriya. That was the case. Psycho. You're not angry about that fact, then? Midoriya. I've never had spyware installed on my phone so that someone could snoop on me. I think I'm flattered. Said the boy, flattered. Midoriya. Well, I suppose I could take action and we could declare it even if you think I ought to be offended. Her lips were squeezed tight together. Is this Midoriya that I'm speaking with? Psycho. What kind of idea do you have? Midoriya. I'll have an idea. Midoriya. Ah, now that I think about it, I did finish the book you sent me. Midoriya. What other suggestions do you have? Psycho. Sending file. The quirk factor. Evolutionary man's extermination of mankind. Midoriya. I'm grateful, Psycho-san. Psycho. How did you feel about the book by Yatsuhashi? Midoriya. It provokes thought. Psycho. Have you had any specific thoughts provoked? Midoriya. Numerous. His behavior was evasive. Midoriya. During lunch, we may talk about it. That is, assuming you're not too busy, Midoriya. Her knowledge of pragmatics and semantics informed her that Midoriya might have been attempting to establish a social relationship by using the discuss it over lunch card, or he could have just been making a simple request to talk about a book. Psycho. I think I have time to clear my schedule. Midoriya. How wonderful. Midoriya. The address will be texted to you. Midoriya. I hope your classes go well. Please accept my best wishes to Professor Miyazaki. She gazed at her phone's last message. Her eyebrows flew up at once. She made sure. She laughed out loud. A big smile was on Midoriya's face as she looked over her contact list. Instead of connecting her to Midoriya's front camera, her specialized app simply displayed a picture of herself wearing her college graduation gown. A specific remark, there was blue sky. More blue than blue. The word was sky blue. The azure heavens were breathtaking. Perched on a rooftop, with his legs hanging loosely to the sides, his phone was next to him, idly streaming Intelli Psycho's university lecture in real time. He reached into a bag of chips with his right hand. Salted. His fingertips fluttered the stuff inside. They located the correct one. Fluid. He snatched it up with his middle and index fingers. They hurled it skyward. It caught in his teeth. Not a crunch. Not a break. He placed the chip aside in a tidy pile. Breathed in the fresh morning air. Carbon dioxide exhaled. Breathed in and out once again. Be content. Just 2 words. A mental directive. A directive that he gave himself. His body responded immediately. His thoughts responded right away. In one instant, dopamine and serotonin shot into his system. His mouth formed a lovely smile. His gaze brightened. Feelings of giddiness coursed through his body. He gave a big belly laugh and threw back his head. Any negativity that tried to creep in was thrown aside by self-provided satisfaction. Any doubts about the sanctity of whether or not he was right to give himself such a precise degree of control over his own feelings. I am here. He laughed as his voice echoed through the wind and screamed at the top of his lungs. His blood pounded in his veins and his heartbeat pounded in his ears, all while he felt a rush of satisfaction at having complete control over his own endocrine system. Hoi. Izuku. What the fuck are you doing on the roof? Beneath him materialized a scowling visage and a mess of blonde hair. There was nothing Kaken's nasty face could do to cheer him up. Izuku couldn't resist a beaming smile that spread across his face. Morning Kaken. Get the fuck off my roof. He laughed again and pivoted his body. A leap of faith, like they often did in that assassin gaming franchise. A backflip, a spin, all of his limbs pressed up against the window as he grabbed on with deft fingertips. Kaken glared at him as she stumbled back from the surprise landing. What's got you in such a good fucking mood? He laughed, nothing. Is it weird, being happy for no reason? You really have to ask something that stupid. I think it's weird, instead, that we need a reason to be happy. You on something? On. Kaken said, drugs. You fucking usin. Izuku chuckled. I don't need drugs Kaken. That wasn't a fucking no. No Kaken. So, the reason you look like you just got your balls softly fondled, how would you know what someone who got their balls fondled looks like? I wasn't being fucking literal. Izuku smiled and raised both hands. He laughed, I didn't say you were. He chuckled, just a funny thought. Izuku couldn't help but chuckle as he said, fondled. Fondling. Fuck. It's too fucking early for this shit. Hey, Kaken, where you using your kwai? His body moved all the time. Moving before he was hit by the blast. He burst out laughing as he leaped backwards off the Kitsuki's window in a flawless fluid motion. Perfectly landing, he raised his hands into the air and mimicked the way Olympic gymnasts bow to the judges. Again, his body whirled in response to instinct, grabbing hold of the rucksack that was hurled in his direction. As he looked up at the window, his bag fell into his outstretched hand and he saw Kitsuki Bakugo's frowning visage and extended middle finger. Get your fucking shit together. All that did was make Midoriya grin. You're not going to throw out Sir Kuro too. The cat isn't the one that's acting fucked in the head. You can just say you like cuddling him. I won't judge you Kaken. Midoriya Izuku laughed as the middle finger was raised for a considerable amount of time. A specific remark he was present. Positioned in the kitchen area. Her nose were penetrated by the scent of eggs that came from the kitchen. She gave herself a pinch. For added precaution, she gave herself a second, more severe pinch. There he stood, in the kitchen, his hair pulled back into a tidy ponytail behind him. Plus, he had an Ultra Chef apron around his waist. She was humming and dancing to a song she had heard but couldn't quite place. Izuku. Good morning Ka-chan. A dazzling grin with brilliant teeth astounded her. Izuku. Sounded a little shaky. Is it really you? Come on Kaken, I made breakfast. He came up to her, putting a gentle touch on her hands before guiding her into the dining room. She sat there, confused and dazed, her heart pounding and squeezing inside her chest. A dish of bacon and eggs was in front of her, grinning at her. Izuku leaned over and planted a kiss on her right cheek as a glass of orange juice gently rested next to her. Izuku, I've got to hurry or I'll be late for school. School? He wore the uniform of his school. Cool. Pressed into shape. Izuku, about last night. Last night, the boy said with an odd scratch to the back of his head. Sorry about last night Ka-chan. I wasn't really thinking things through and acted like a really spoiled brat. He bowed. I said some really hurtful things, and I'm sorry. Her son's head was bent, properly expressing regret. Her lips pressed together again in silence as her mouth opened and her dry breath escaped. It's fine. Izuku raised his head. He gave her a smile. Smiled down at her. She felt her chest constrict. His smile spread like wildfire. I'm going to make things up to you. Midoriya moved a piece of paper under her tray and slid it across the table. She lifted it up with unsteady fingers. Confusion replaced trepidation. A flyer. The flyer said. Mother-son and father-daughter yoga classes are now being offered at Ultra Fitness Gym. Giving her another flyer, he said, rockin' music stores. Music classes at a family discount. Bring a family member and enjoy amazing deals. Izuku, I don't understand. And now for the third flyer. Oba-chan's bakeries. The finest baking is done with family. There are discounts available. She set the flyer down. What's this about? Ways for us to spend some more time together. Spend more time? The boy gave his chin a scratch. San, I realized for years I've always known what my dream was and what I wanted to be. But I've never known what dreams you have. And what you want to be. And I realized I never cared to ask. His eyes gleamed. What brought this on? The young man shrugged. I did some thinking, Ka-chan. Organized my thoughts. I realize now what's really important. What's really important? Izuku circumnavigated the table. Her son approached her from behind while she was seated and placed his hands gently on her shoulders. Immediately, the weight of the world lifted off her shoulders. She felt the ache disappear from her muscles and the stiffness from her joints, as if some unseen deity had come and, with a touch of a button, cleansed her of all physical stress. She could not recall how relaxed her body had ever been. It was the most at ease she had felt in years. Her son said, your dreams, Ka-chan. Tell me your dreams. It was as though she were floating. Devoid of weight. On a meandering gentle cloud. Like ice cubes melting on beach sand, her concerns melted. She felt 10 years younger just by feeling Izuku's gentle angelic hands caress her shoulders. My dreams, she started. I was never the office type or the ambitious type. My quirk wasn't suited for heroics, but it was amazing at awing children. I remember, before you were born, when I worked at a creche. When the children got noisy or loud or couldn't sleep, I would hide and use my quirk on their toys and I would make voices and they would all go quiet and stare, oohing and awing. She chuckled. Some of them went on to tell their parents that their toys came to life. It wasn't much, but I enjoyed that, watching the happiness in young children attracting toys around them and seeing the wonder in their eyes, and it made me love that. It made me want that. All I ever wanted was to have a family like that, with happiness in the eyes of the children, with happiness in everyone. So I'd hurt a lot more when you didn't get your quirk, and I felt I'd failed. The one thing I wanted was to have a happy family, and yet I couldn't even give my own son happiness. Izuku wrapped her arms carefully around her. It's fine, Ka-chan. You didn't fail. With a beautiful smile on his face, he knelt beside her. You didn't fail. Izuku, her son, grinned more. So, does that mean you want tons and tons smiling grandchildren? Oh, Izuku. Inko said as she wiped away a tear. You're a bit too young for that right now. I just want you to pursue your dreams first. Finish school. Become the hero you've always wanted to be. Shine brightly and you'll make your mother the happiest mother in the world. Midoriya Izuku smiled with his brilliant teeth, giving a fictitious salute of attention. Yes ma'am. Oh, come of it. As you wish ma'am. As Izuku pretended to be a soldier, Inko chuckled. His right hand was positioned over his chest. Midoriya Izuku will accomplish that dream. Whatever it takes. As he declared his intentions, his eyes gleamed. Whatever it takes. The specific remark, thank you so much Midoriya-kun. I don't know what I'd have done without my notebook. Midoriya grinned and said, you're welcome. Thank you Midoriya-kun. Midoriya bowed and said, you're welcome. Midoriya-kun. I saw your All Might drawings in my classroom. You're awesome. Midoriya-kun found my missing pen. Isn't he thoughtful? Midoriya-kun, could I get your help? Midoriya-kun. Midoriya-kun. With one eye twitching, Kitsuki Bakugo gazed at the astounding shift in the dynamics of the class. The class's female members gathered around Midoriya as though he were the Buddha, offering advice on how to become enlightened. He could as well just fuck off. PSST. Kitsuki. Bakugo saw his classmate calling out to him and he averted a lazy eye to the side, snarling under his breath. The fuck do you want, boner face? The young man grimaced. My name is Mitsuda. Don't remember fucking asking. Asshole. Just wanted to ask if you know what's up with Izuku. Fuck if I know. It annoyed him. After an argument with his mother, the sniveling, whiny, and always cloud-eyed Midoriya went to sleep on his floor yesterday night and woke up this morning looking as though he had discovered the key to eternal life. If not immortality, then the key to endless bliss, at least. Jealous that he's suddenly the class chick magnet. Who would give a fuck about that? Mitsuda gestured. The bunch of boys were looking daggers at Midoriya, most of the guys for starters. Who knew all Midoriya needed to become a chick magnet was to be happy? Kitsuki shot the nerd in question a sidelong glance. Anyone with eyes could see that the youngster wasn't acting, from the tone of his laughter to the lightness of his steps and animated motions of his limbs. False joy was simple to detect. To be truly happy meant to completely disregard his own social awkwardness and fear. A callousness towards his own timidity and uncertainty. He was indifferent to the views or perceptions of others. It didn't matter how much someone loved or despised him, it didn't put any weight on their shoulders. The nerd was blindly certain in his happiness. It wouldn't take an eyeball to tell you that real self-confidence was hot as hell. Midoriya-kun. The lunch break came to an end when the bell rang. As girls from all classes were forced to depart, there were many sighs and complaints, and Midoriya Izuku found himself back in his seat, humming a little melody to himself. Kitsuki glanced at him from the corner of his eye. Something bothering you, Kakin? You deal with your shit. Izuku gave a nod. Kachan and I are going for family music classes start Saturday. Then family baking class on Sunday. We're trying to find some room for finger painting and yoga. Kitsuki remarked, too much info. Just wanted to make sure you did what you needed to. Once more, the bastard's smile nearly caused him to go blind. Fuck. Turn off your teeth, Izuku. Referring to gleaming teeth. You know, you and Mitsuki-san could join us, not a fucking chance. Izuku positioned his hands behind his head. You ever wonder why we never hear about All Might's wife? All Might doesn't have a fucking wife. What are you on about? Izuku grinned, yeah. We never hear of his kids either. Or family. To become the most exceptional hero. The boy's eyes shifted. I wonder how lonely he is. He wasn't bothered by Izuku the remainder of the lesson. Rather, he buried his nose in books. Fresh ones. Thick ones. Books with a textbook appearance. Kitsuki tried to concentrate on her studies as well. Should focus solely on the teacher's words as they were being said. Must quit obsessing about those foolish 6 words. There were several risks associated with being a pro hero. He knew that with a fuck. There was always the possibility that a villain might decide to strike you right in the most painful place because everyone knew your true name, birthday, and, in certain situations, where you fucked lived, ate, and shat. That was why so many heroes had perished. Some of them weren't even big shots, they were just up-and-comers who took down one villain without a name, only for the villain's friends to exact retribution by unexpectedly showing up at the hero's house and fucking shit up. Pro heroes married other pro heroes as a form of protection because of this, however it only slightly increased the likelihood that the union would fail. Death was a given in the industry, frequently as certain as corporate merchandise. You said the music classes are on Saturday. That afternoon, Izuku blinded him for the second time with his bullshit teeth. A specific remark, he had been anticipating the biology lesson. Specifically, he had been anticipating their utilization of the lab. As they entered the room with white walls, he could sense the slight scent of sterilized air and bleach. His ears were attuned to the faintest sounds of gossip and conversation, twitching every now and then when his name was called out. Dopamine and serotonin were still being produced and renewed by his body. The price of playing with the chemistry of his own body was slightly restless fingers that constantly drummed to a beat of their own. They rattled away at his sides. Pair up. We're going to be doing some dissection today. The person to your left is your partner for this exercise. There were moans of displeasure in response to the teacher's pronouncement. A sound of laughing erupted in his throat, which he had to suppress. A female in his class served as his partner. He thought her name was Suzume. She didn't want to make eye contact. She tapped her hands against the hem of her skirt and he saw that they were moving erratically. Remember, lab safety is always first. Even rinsing his hands beneath chilly water couldn't stop him from humming happily. He discovered himself gradually biting his bottom lip while silently instructing his mind to limit serotonin production. It was not the time for giddiness in the lab. Granted, even if he were delirious, his quirk would ensure the accuracy of his incisions and cuts. The rubber gloves snugly pressed against his skin. His companion was holding hers. "Suzume-san, are you ready?" Actually I think I should get a different partner." "Something wrong?" She gave her shoulders a rub. Her cheeks had reddened. She was breathing erratically. From where he stood, he could hear her heartbeat. Quickly. Pulsing. Throbbing inside her chest. Do you mind?" "Suzume." A student in his class who specifically asked to be transferred away from Kaken because she was constantly agitated when she sat next to him. A girl who detested sitting next to Mitsuda just as much. He closed his eyes and muttered a curse beneath his breath. Put an end to happiness. Izuku felt sick from the withdrawal of feel-good chemicals. His motivation to stay in the class was vanished. To proceed with something. He would be better off dying and sparing himself a meaningless life. Use little dopamine. A constant height. Not devoid of happiness, but not overindulged in it either. The girl next to him sighed with relief. How did you do that?" "Sorry. Most people can't just fine-tune their emotions like that." His mouth pushed close to hers. "It felt worse for you?" Pulling on her gloves, she looked at the table and the rat specimen that was on it. "It felt like my heart was going to explode. So much happiness and warmth. It was overwhelming." Izuku winced. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't dislike it." He made an effort to look away from the girl with the auburn hair. The rat stuck to the surface. The stark white floor glistened in his mirror image. The light bulbs are fluorescent. The white ceiling. Anywhere, except on her face, please. The instructor went around the classroom explaining the scientific method and outlining the appropriate frame of mind required for carrying out scientific research. A few lads who were playing with their rat were chastised by him. Chastised a few girls who treated the animal more carelessly than excrement. The man's words seemed to blend together, as Izuku noticed. The room grew ever more gloomy. Deeper. It was everything lacking in color. When the happy flood subsided, his mental state reverted to something strange. The teacher's tirade seemed to bother him little, he realized. Little thought was given to the pupils, who would probably never use this class again. Little thought was given to the group of white rodents that would ultimately be killed for scientific research, serving only as a teaching tool for a group of inattentive kids to learn the ins and outs of rodent anatomy. Wouldn't it be hilarious if a stranger or a higher power showed up and set them down on a table? Muttering and laughing as their own existence was turned into a lesson for impressionable, uninterested youth. Then maybe it wouldn't be so funny. Maybe he would locate the most heartless people and treat them the same way as lab rats for meaningless experiments in an attempt to equalize the injustice of the nature of peculiarities in society. Go back. Suzume grasped his with a gloved hand. He looked at her, half-closed eyes. Something was in her eyes. Worried. Inquisitiveness. Concerned. Odd. What might make her want him? She put her hand on his and shouted, "Back. Return." He growled. "To the happy you. This you it's scary. You're scaring me." "Oh, look, in my hand," he said, holding out his palm. He breathed into his empty palm, saying, "All the reasons I care. Gone." Just like that. Was she being scared by him? What a very insightful detail that didn't make his day any better. Was it his responsibility that she had a birth defect that made it possible for her to sense other people's feelings? He was unable to experience any feelings at all at the moment. His emotional state was not very frightening. He was just indifferent. He showed no concern for her. Had little affection for his classmates. Not overly concerned about anything or anyone. He was indifferent to his dreams. Feel joyful. The gates of bliss opened and he chased away the last wandering idea before it came. Beside him, Suzume trembled a little and released his fingers as though she had been scorched. "Sorry. I'm sorry, did I get help, Midoriya?" She excused herself from the class by asking the teacher for permission. For a brief moment, Midoriya mitigated his absence of a spouse. It didn't affect him at all. Later on, he would offer Suzume a small gesture of his remorse. She couldn't figure out why he had to do the actions that he did. He could not criticize her response. The rat was ready to be dissected as it lay on the table. Izuku took up the scalpel and began working while singing a lively melody to himself. Eventually, his teacher and classmates would assemble, all intent on his process. It was simple and crude to dissect a rat, but it was more difficult to open its skull without killing it and test its motor reflexes by poking its brain. With their simpler systems, brain surgery was easier on smaller animals like rats. His peculiarity directed his hands and completed the information gaps. I could change some stuff around here and add some new ones. After his operation was finished and the wounds were sutured, he realized he was the only person to dissect a rat without killing it. Even though his small white mouse was still alive, the changes he made to its brain would not become apparent until it had fully recovered. His sensei cleared his throat. Midoriya-kun. What did you do to that rodent? Just a minor surgery to tweak its parasympathetic nervous system, sensei. Izuku grumbled. A surgery? With school equipment? Izuku remarked, I'll come back to check up on him. Do you mind, sensei? No. Not at all. Do as you will, Midoriya. He had completed his surgery and his teacher and pupils were behaving strangely. Though his name was still barely audible on their lips, the way they said it had changed. Midoriya walked out of the classroom, humming a little song to himself, concluding that in the end, it didn't matter. Rather, he was pleased to learn that his peculiarity could actually make it possible for him to execute difficult jobs like surgery flawlessly. His quirk benefited him in some areas where he was ignorant, but it was not useful at all when he had no knowledge at all. His hands moved as though he was being controlled by someone outside of himself, giving his nerves the muscle memory necessary to carry out a task he was only vaguely familiar with. In order to become even more proficient in the field, he would have to watch and listen to recordings of increasingly complex operations so that he could imitate them. The more he observed, the greater his knowledge base grew and the more extensive his peculiarity developed. He arrived at one of the school's water fountains and drank from it, letting his thoughts wander and grow. His brain's neuroplasticity had increased as a result of using precision. His capacity for information absorption, digestion, and learning. Furthermore, he had acquired a type of subconscious pattern identification that he was just now starting to understand. All the while, his mind was taking in the nuances of the universe, remembering and logging everything, and without any conscious effort on his part, objects that appeared to be related began to cluster together, a clear case of cause and effect unfolding in front of him. There was a wealth of information in the corridor, and his mind was using only that knowledge to highlight and project what would happen over the following few minutes. The student was walking forward mindlessly, carrying a stack of papers. The girls were discussing about a female celebrity's fashion choices while clipping their nails in the corner. The youngster with a strange smoking habit smiled as the asthmatic student coughed and puffed angrily at his empty inhaler. The period of Midoriya Izuku dragged. Boy pulls open the window. Strong wind. Heading south. Papers shoot skyward. Up the skirts. Blinded. Slips. Falls, landing face first. Izuku gave a blink. He watched the events unfold, lazily staring. Swinging open the windows, the asthmatic ran to them. The girls tugged down their skirts, squealing. The boy carrying the piles of papers slipped and his papers shot upward. His path of landing, oh my fucking god. Izuku grimaced slightly and closed one eye. Whoa. And I thought shit like this only happened in Eki manga. It was a voice from behind him. Over the sound of hard slaps being meted out to the fortunate or unlucky pervert, as it were, Mitsuda whistled faintly. Nice panties, ladies. Fuck off, Minoru. Izuku gave a blink. Move 3 inches to your left. Huh. Now. Mitsuda followed his instructions. A baseball smashed into a wall after tearing through the open window and through the space where his head had been. What the fuck? The boy lowered his head, causing Izuku's mouth to quiver. It's fine, Mitsuda-san. Since when can you see the future? Izuku's lips were pursed. I can't. Bullshit. What was that then? With an uneasy smile, he attempted, predicting outcomes based on recognizing patterns in an established system. I'm just figuring out the kinks of it myself. Mitsuda gave him a squint. You. His eyes grew wide. Don't tell me you used your quirk on your brain. I did. Mitsuda gave a whistle. You haven't gone psycho yet, so I'm assuming you did something right. What's it like? I can change and set my emotional states at will. My brain picks up on information faster. I have memories of being born, and I can't forget the odd pattern on a falling leaf I saw this morning because it landed on a crack that wasn't on the road before. Mitsuda whistled once again, memories of controlling emo. He slapped his fists together, saying, damn. So that's why you've been in a good mood all day. And here I was thinking you got laid or something. Mitsuda's gaze widened. Oh wait, if you can control all aspects of your brain, doesn't that mean that when you sleep you'll always have lucid dreams you can control? I guess. And doesn't that mean you can make yourself hallucinate on command? Why would I want to make myself hallucinate? Mitsuda had a cunning smile. Instant sexy daydream. If you could give yourself audio, visual and tactile hallucinations, that would be epic. Go on, test it out. He was wary of doing experiments involving self-induced hallucinations. What am I supposed to hallucinate? Try tactile hallucinations. Make yourself feel something that isn't happening. Like someone rubbing your hands. Izuku Midoriya closed his eyes. He saw it exactly as Mitsuda had urged. He was about to think of it when he felt a hand gently brush his arm. That's not funny, Mitsuda. What? Stop rubbing my arm. I'm not. Izuku suddenly opened his eyes. Mitsuda made an innocent motion with his hands in the air. Izuku realized he could still feel his hand as he continued to stare at it. He can still feel someone stroking his palm very softly and lightly. That, Izuku-kun, Mitsuda responded, is the frightening power of the human brain. Do you have any other ideas for things I could do? Mitsuda tapped his chin with his index finger and hummed. Well, you could turn your mind palaces into actual palaces by throwing visual hallucinations into the mix. You could make yourself drunk or high on command, which would be pretty cool for party tricks, or just close your eyes and imagine getting a blowjob and viola. Your figment of your imagination arrives and starts to do the deed. Though, if it feels real, is it still a figment of your imagination? Any useful ideas? Arms crossed, Mitsuda said. Prude. Whatever. How about you try giving yourself synesthesia? Synesthesia? Mitsuda shrugged, you know. Smelling colors. Tasting sounds. That whole stuff. I doubt it'll be all that useful, but it's a new experience. The kid said. Man, I'm so freaking jealous. Wish I could rent your quirk for a day. All I can do is gain some muscle and facial hair and turn horny. Izuku said, maybe you could try extending your quirk. Outwards. What do you mean? Like midnight. Maybe you could make yourself secrete pheromones or a strong scent. The kid speculated. I mean, I'm not sure it would work, but the taller boy's expression fell. The look on a man's face after learning something revolutionary. Pheromones, secrete, he mumbled. That could work. Sorry, Midoriya, I need to see you around. With a grumble to himself similar of Izuku's own habit, Mitsuda left. Alright, I believe I've given Mitsuda some food for thought. Izuku looked at his watch, just to be sure he knew how many hours remained in the day. He needed everything to go smoothly so he could follow his aim, which was to meet with Psycho. Izuku clenched his fist, fortifying his thoughts. Whatever it takes. A specific REMA arcade was a rather upscale restaurant. Remarkably, since it seemed that a reservation was required in order to secure a seat, she was almost certain that Midoriya Izuku had sent her the incorrect address through SMS. She realized there was no mistake when she looked inside and saw him sitting there, still wearing his school uniform, a smile on his face, and a gentle gesture towards her. He stood up, gave her a startling act of chivalry, took her right hand, and planted a gentle chaste kiss on her fingers. Hello, Enteli-san, he said. For a few moments, she wasn't sure if she was going to encounter the same Midoriya Izuku that she had seen the day before. When the boy pretended to assist her with her seat, she became even more skeptical. He had a peculiar charm in that he always had a big smile on his face while performing his customary deeds of chivalry. Both customary and incredibly surprising. You've certainly gone to a great deal of effort to impress me. I want to change the system. Not a preface. No protracted preamble. The hands of Midoriya Izuku were steepled, and he wore a false facade of professionalism along with his courteous grin. Psycho realized right away that she had misinterpreted the boy's motivations. Misinterpreted his invitation for her to come here. This was hardly a friendly gathering. She reached for the menu, opened it, and gave it a cursory glance, asking, doesn't everyone? Midoriya's right palm tightened. Most people seem content with how things are. Heroes. Villains. Quirks that cause you misfortune or decide your destiny. I can't accept it. I can't accept a world where my entire life is determined by an ability I didn't choose at birth. I hear it everywhere, all the time. My mother, she wasn't born with a flashy quirk and she chose a simple life for it. My friend, Kitsuki, because he was born with a flashy quirk, everyone told him he'd make a great hero, and I don't think he's ever even considered that he could be anything else but that. Mitsuda, he wants to become an adult film star because he's worried his quirk will get him into trouble if he tries to just take a normal job. Even I never believed that I could do anything because I didn't have a quirk. The whole world, everyone, we have it in our heads that we are nothing but the sums of the ability we are born with. I don't want that. I hate that. We are so much more than just our quirks. She shut off the menu. What are you going to do about it? He held up his palms, saying, equal the playing field. If I could study more, learn more about the quirk factor, I'll think about how to create inhibitor devices or something biological like serums medication. Serums that inhibit people's quirks. As a temporary stopgap measure, he clarified. To make life easier for people with troublesome quirks. If there was something, like over-the-counter medication that was globally available, people like Mitsuda who are born with quirks that'd otherwise make them have difficult lives could live without fear or worry. The waitress came up, holding a pen. Tea. Chamomile. Speaking on his behalf, Midoriya said, a water will be fine, thank you. After the waiter left, she started her cross-examination. As inspiring as your motives are, Midoriya-kun, you're forgetting something. Quirks are a power status. With the end of pre-quirk society, a new arms race began. The superhuman arms race. Quirks and heroes are the nuclear armaments of society. Can you imagine a society where anti-nuclear devices can be found at every corner drugstore? Where all that is needed for a layman to take down a god is to purchase some pills from a pharmacy. Midoriya stated, I'll make it work based on intent. You're surely jesting. If the anti-quirk serum detects a strong resistance, it'll fail to take effect. So people can't abuse it, can't use it on those who aren't willing. Psycho chuckled. So, what, you want to invent drugs that require consent to work? Do you realize how ridiculous that sounds? Human biology isn't that convenient, Midoriya-kun. He was not bothered. There are quirks that allow people to manipulate forces like time, space and gravity. Quirks that allow people to interfere with laws of physics. Is a drug that works based on a person's mental willingness any less ridiculous than someone who can change the weather with a punch or create a black hole with a finger? Her lips were pursed. I'll admit, when you put it that way it does seem feasible. She exhaled. Of course, all of this is mostly conjecture, but assuming you do somehow succeed in creating this anti-quirk medication, I assume you have other plans for quirk society. Several, Midoriya enthusiastically nodded his head. I've been thinking of ways to abolish the entire hero and villain system entirely. Devices that can use algorithms to predict the likelihood of a crime occurring and prevent it before it does. An entire revamp of the country's architecture that'll increase efficiency and productivity. A method of highlighting and cultivating the individual talents in people and calculating the best ways for them to achieve happiness and satisfaction. It seems I underestimated your ambition. I've always been stubbornly ambitious. Just for the most part, I focused my ambition on becoming a hero. You make it sound like you've given up that ambition. I haven't. Psycho furrowed her brow. You still want to be a pro-hero? Most of my plans won't work without public support and approval. The fastest way to get that is to be a hero, even if I do intend to make the system obsolete. He clarified. Also, there are pro-heroes who have part-time jobs, such as Cementus and Best Jeanist. Being a pro-hero will also allow me access to amazing people and places much better than if I tried to do it all alone. The waitress showed up. There was a glass of cold water on Midoriya's end. The tea she ordered arrived in a sophisticated floral patterned cup on her end. When the Pakage milk and cubed sugars arrived in a smaller cup, she gave the server a grateful nod. Tell me, Midoriya-kun, you seem to have your plan all figured out. So, what role exactly do I play in all of this? You want to make things better, don't you? I have my own goals, Midoriya-kun. My own plans and my own methods. For the most part, none of your goals clash with mine, but that does not mean I'm interested in a partnership. Midoriya's mouth fell open. You're not. I know what you want. Funding. Support. But from the standpoint of an investor, all you have are grand plans with no means to achieve them. Scientists are still researching and discovering new things about the quirk factor. So far, no one has discovered a breakthrough that'll allow them to create an anti-quirk serum. You expect me to believe that a boy who's still in middle school and has zero research experience will somehow crack the code within what, months? Years? Those scientists aren't me. I can't. So, you're saying you, Midoriya Izuku, middle schooler, are superior to the world's greatest scientists? I'm not. But my quirk. Psycho picked up her cup gently and said, precision, yes. I know your quirk, Midoriya-kun. And I'm telling you, even with your quirk, it'll take you several decades to be able to create the drug you're dreaming of. If at all you succeed, assuming your life isn't cut short by your insistence on becoming a pro-hero, or assuming you do not somehow arouse the ire of some villain that leaves you crippled or incapacitated. That won't happen. You're not clairvoyant, Midoriya. It's easy to fall prey to the survivorship bias and believe you're special. The numbers insist otherwise. Psycho raised her hand. That aside, drugs typically require several years of testing and verifying by the government. The odds are higher that the government will bury it in bureaucratic red tape for years upon years, while utilizing it in military campaigns as a secret weapon against foreign powers. It'll be a miracle if your drug ever sees the light of day at all. What are you saying? She motioned in their direction and said, the status quo doesn't like to be changed. The nail that sticks out will be hammered down. While it's great to have such lofty ambitions, I can't invest in optimism and ambition alone. Perhaps if you had something tangible that proves you can create what you claim you can, I'd have considered it. Unfortunately, Midoriya-kun, all you have are words. Something in his demeanor changed. She saw instantly that his eyes become half-lidded. He had a carefree, even dangerous, posture. A spark of something in his semi-focused, half-lidded gaze gave her an unwelcome shiver down her spine. For an instant, she sensed a significant shift in the atmosphere around him, as if he had been replaced by a double. He said, so, in a drawn-out speech. You're saying you don't believe I can do it? Her lips were pursed. Midoriya, are you altering your mental state? You didn't answer my question. Clearly in control of his mental condition, she observed. Interested. It detailed how she came to have the confidence to carry out deeds of chivalry while being a shy and awkward boy. Listen, Midoriya-kun. If there was, somehow, a person out there who managed to devise a serum that could inhibit or stop quirks, that person would be feared. Governments, society, individuals with personal stakes all would be filled with dread at the existence of such a person and try to eliminate them. They would have created something which could completely upend society and civilization as we know it. They would become, simultaneously, the most powerful and most wanted in the world. Midoriya-kun, do you believe you have what it takes to bear that burden? The boy's head tipped forward, unafraid. Whatever it takes. She hadn't anticipated receiving a response so quickly. Forgive me, Midoriya-kun, but you don't strike me as the type of person willing to compromise his own beliefs for the sake of a goal. Sacrifice yourself, perhaps. But sacrifice others. That's the second time you've doubted me, Psycho-san. She ran her fingertips along the bridge of her nose. You obstinate little one, you know. She recalled that Midoriya Izuku had a twisted mentality and could not bear it when someone else showed no faith or belief in them. Her doubts about his conviction would just make him turn away from her even more. She went for her bag and pulled out her phone, saying, "Alright, Midoriya. If you believe you're up to the task of upending society, I'll send you in the right direction." She murmured under her breath and pressed a few buttons. "I've just sent you the coordinates of a location I suspect to be the known trading spot of an individual that sells the black market quirk enhancement drug commonly known as Trigger." His eyebrows lifted. His expression screwed up in obvious surprise as his demeanor suddenly softened and shifted. What? Trigger is a quirk-enhancing drug, but it comes with the downside of reducing higher brain function and intellect of those who use it, throwing them into a berserk aggressive state. If you so believe yourself capable of alchemy, then analyze the substance and dilute it. Create a pure version of it that works without the mental drawbacks. She continued. If you can't even manage this basic level of chemistry, you might as well give up on creating your consent drugs. The boy remained silent. His snout was twisted. Wrinkled brows. Hands, deep in contemplation. She obviously neglected to clarify that this work went well beyond the scope of basic chemistry. Famous for its potent effects, Trigger was said to have originated in Japan. Numerous people have attempted to decipher the formula for a drink that could instantly increase a person's quirk factor. Researchers in labs all across the world were at a loss as to how to separate Trigger's mind-altering properties from its quirky factor-boosting component. The man who created the medication Trigger was an acknowledged chemical genius deserving of a Nobel Prize. Psycho compared this once-in-a-lifetime genius to Hawking or Einstein during the pre-quirk era. Theories said that the person's peculiar ability to change chemical bonds at the atomic level was the sole explanation for how they were able to produce Trigger in the first place. Essentially, she was assigning Midoriya a very challenging assignment from the beginning. Not that he is aware of it. She got up from her chair and gave herself a tidy pat. "Once you've succeeded, Midoriya-kun, I'll believe that you're serious about this. I'll invest all my family's fortune in you. Anything at all you want. But if you fail to succeed at this," she ended the sentence without saying anything. "I'll be seeing you, Midoriya-kun. Extend my greetings to Mitsuda-kun. The specific remark most coveted and powerful person on the planet." Walking, Midoriya Izuku's body moved automatically. With his hands in his pockets, he steered clear of pedestrians and obstacles while he mentally relived his encounter with Psycho 1,000,000 times. The likelihood that the government will bury it in red tape and bureaucracy is higher. On the cobblestone pavement, he kicked a stone. There was no comfort in the lengthy streets for him. He wasn't sure if Psycho was being overly negative or if he had been overly hopeful about the strategy he intended to employ to achieve his objectives. His only desire was to assist those whose peculiarities remained on the edge of danger. Those whose peculiarities compelled them to lead a specific lifestyle. And all for the sake of giving these individuals a little respite from the hardships of everyday existence, a mission that would put him in the crosshairs of the whole world. It is irrelevant. You've made up your mind already. Whatever is necessary. Izuku, do whatever it takes. You will carry out this task. Midoriya scratched the back of his skull, sighing. During the conversation, his body's production of dopamine and serotonin had decreased. His remarks had upset and hurt him, Psycho. At Psycho's deficiency of faith in him. He was sufficiently upset to go to a lower emotional state by default. That's when he found it hard to feel anything or anyone for that matter. He dubbed it the apathy state. Sometimes, it was strangely pleasant to not care. He couldn't, however, remain in that state for very long because the indifference had a tendency to be fairly indiscriminate. Psycho-san said the alley on Hirohito Street is the location. All of Midoriya's drug experience came from using painkillers during his bullying episodes. He was vaccinated against many viruses and diseases that were thought to be extremely deadly in the past when he was younger. With the exception of those 2 incidents, he had little experience with medicines or medication. He had never before purchased over-the-counter vitamins, let alone the necessary medications for a cold. He was now combing the streets late at night in an attempt to get a quirk enhancer on the illegal market. Set off. Midoriya's mind sifted through data, looking for any memories or information he might have on the subject. Fragments of newspaper he'd skimmed. Idle talks while watching a news story on TV. Radio talk shows featuring anti-drug efforts. His mind kept a record of every allusion and every usage of the word trigger. He inhaled deeply and told his brain to project the knowledge onto a visual hallucination that appeared before him. The delusion seemed quite realistic. The panels before him seemed to be employing a high-tech holographic gadget to reproduce memories and images of his experience with the word trigger. As he started to go through the bits of information, his body operated automatically. Newspaper stories discussing trigger, a new medicine, and its risks, pop-up ads for quirk-boosting medication appear on Mitsuda's porn sites. Talk show host talking about trigger on Kaken's home TV in the background. He turned right so as not to run into a couple on the street. Trigger is well known for enhancing personal quirks. Individuals with less offensive quirks tend to use it more frequently. The duration of the strain varies, with some variants lasting a few minutes and others up to several hours. The reason for the differences in strain efficiency is up for debate, but there are arguments for mixing prototype batches with pure batches. Izuku Midoriya muttered under his breath as he reorganized the floating information panels. Justifications for the drugs increased aggression, including the correlation between quirk factor and aggression in research. Research refuted allegations that claimed trigger was mass-produced for military use and employed as a super serum. After dodging a lamppost and nodding encouragingly to a passing policeman, Izuku started to scratch the back of his skull, trying to make sense of more data. Trigger has ties to the Japanese Yakuza. Mentions of the expanding Yakuza force in Japan, press stories highlighting the decline in gang-related violence, various Yakuza organizations being unified under a single worldwide force. Stopping in the middle of the road, Midoriya fixed his gaze on the name that seemed to float there. Rewired for subconscious pattern recognition, his brain was telling him, in some manner, that the drug trigger was directly tied to the floating name. Shai Haseikai. Shai Haseikai is a national Yakuza organization with 8 precepts, known as the 8 and Dangerous Ambitions. Its members are unknown. Mentioned on a watch list of villains and mentioned in poisonous quarantined online forums, Izuku gave his head a quick rub. Relax, Izuku. Relax. All he had to do was buy their merchandise. That was it. Not that he was going to engage in combat with them. All he wanted was their merchandise. He turned right again, making sure he was really at one of the addresses Psycho had sent to his phone. With its abundance of empty beer cans and snuffed cigarettes, this alley was darker than most. Izuku moaned as he moved deeper into the alley in an attempt to find someone, trying his best not to trip on 1 or 2 condoms. I have no idea how much the medication is supposed to cost. At least he still had his lunch money. He hoped that would suffice. Hello? The alley was empty of people. Drug dealer-san. He became more and more aware that there was an awful stink coming from within the farther he went inside, away from the light. His eyes instantly became wet. Despite his initial want to gag, he was able to suppress it. It was an awful stench, and as it blended with the blood fragrance, it was getting worse. Midoriya felt time slip away from her. Blood. An excessive amount of blood. Massive blood loss. Something dark and shadowy. Throw away the beer can. Plunge. To the left. Yes. Discard. His oddity blended into reality. He cocked his head to avoid getting hit by the empty beer can that was thrown at him. He spun just in time to avoid the knife that lunged out of the darkness and towards his neck. He bent to the left to avoid the right swing and took a stride to the right, avoiding the left swing. Just moments before impact, his right hand raised and removed the knife from his assailant's grasp. His rapid heartbeat was audible to him. The knife just inches from his cranium. His body was overcome with a strong desire to kill, causing an adrenaline rush. It was the unexpected surge of adrenaline that caught Midoriya off guard. There was so much of it that the force of the blood pouring through his body caused him to genuinely smile. He couldn't recall the last time he had engaged in any activity that caused his heart to race. Are you the dealer? The female who attacked him had almost the same appearance as him. Her chin began to ooze blood, covering her bare body. Nudie made an effort to maintain eye contact. He did, however, manage to catch a glance of what was below, and that was all it needed for the image to remain etched in his mind forever. His body was producing a specific hormone, which told him he loved what he saw. He pushed the ideas away and cleared his mind. The girl bit her fingers tenderly and chuckled, her expression twisted into one that made Midoriya uneasy. I'm going to kill you. Wait, you really shouldn't. She lunged towards him. She came running towards him. Izuku let out a moan. He had spent a long time sparring with Kitsuki Bakugo. Your motions are slow in comparison to someone who might use explosions to increase his speed and change directions and activities at any time. Sluggish and steady. He dodged beneath her first blow, drawing on memories from his childhood of watching martial arts films and the few moments he'd seen of mixed martial arts and wrestling. His years of witnessing and experiencing bullying have given him an awareness of the tactics and strength required to bully someone. Her pathetic defenses were smashed aside by his hand as he moved in close, turning her around and slamming her onto the ground while holding both of her hands behind her back. To make sure she couldn't get away, he pressed his knee to her back. He apologized in a bashful manner. You're actually the first person who's tried to kill me. A lot of people will be sad if I die, and I have a lot of things I want to accomplish, so I can't really hold back against someone who wants to take my life. She made an effort to struggle. Attempted to escape. He refused to give her the chance. Can you stop? This is kind of awkward because you're not wearing any clothes, and if someone came along they might think I was doing something bad. From the perspective of an outsider, Izuku realized he was in danger. There was no amount of explanation that could explain why he was on top of a nude girl and had pinned her to the ground. Hello Izuku. He said. Midoriya Izuku. What's yours? The girl remained silent. Izuku inquired, is there a problem you have? I don't believe people just try to kill others without reason. Especially strangers. If you're in trouble or need any help I can help you out. The young lady chuckled. You're so funny Izuku-kun. Izuku scowled. Why did you try to kill me? Let me go and I'll show you. Does it have something to do with your quirk? Izuku-kun says the funniest things. He sighed, scratching the back of his head, so it does have to do with your quirk. Another one folks who were unique do of their peculiarities. Do you know where the trigger dealer in this area is supposed to be? He's gone. Gone. The young lady sang. Gone. Izuku looked off into the distance. On the floor, he could see an outline that looked slightly human. Both human and immobile. Deceased. 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 Murder. Killer. Crime. Murder. Give her over. Law enforcement. Make an arrest. Correct action. The proper course of action. It was the appropriate decision to give the cops a call right away. To permit her arrest by the cops. Remove her. She caused someone's death. Ended a person's life. What possible defense could she offer? Not one. Not at all. It was unacceptable. There was absolutely no reason to take a human life. The cops would seize the body if he called them right now. Additionally, they would remove the body's trigger. Furthermore, it would raise concerns. Exams. How could he have known that it was so late at night in this remote alleyway? Could he tell them anything? Had he been taking a walk? Would he lie? Would he be honest with them and say he came here to acquire drugs? It would be in his file. That kind of thing could be linked to him. Even though it was small, it would eventually have an impact on him. What if that made it harder for him to get into UA? What would happen if it was brought up later as a point of contention against him? Act morally. The appropriate action. The appropriate action. Removing a killer from society would be the morally correct thing to do. But at what price? At what price to his future? Would he improve or preserve the lives of dozens of individuals at the expense of their suffering? That trigger was what he needed. He had to investigate it, study it, and show Psycho that he was competent. Show that he was genuinely committed to carrying out his word. Whatever is necessary. Now he felt bad about disclosing her his name. If he hadn't taken that action, he could have cleared his own record. Pull the trigger, tie her up, and then give the police an anonymous tip so they can come get her. Now that she knew his name, he was unable to do that. When the cops asked her how she was tied up, she had no excuse not to tell them his name. He spoke gently and said, I'm going to let you go. Please don't attack me. You've already killed someone. I might break your limbs if you attack me, if only so you can't use them to kill anyone ever again. The girl trembled at what he said. He closed his eyes and released a quick rasping breath. With caution, he got up from her back. Without warning, she whirled around and swung her lips at him. His right hand jerked into motion, hitting her lower jaw with his palm. Her eyes lost their brightness. She passed out and fell to the ground, and he moved aside. With a sigh, Midoriya took one final look at the girl before moving closer to the trigger dealer's body and hardening his resolve. Whatever is necessary. Warning tape in yellow and red lights. The mutterings of a crowd positioned behind the warning signs with their phones raised and white lights blazing. As he saw his fellow police officers tell the throng to disperse, he could already see the glimpse of a black media van approaching from a distance. This is an ongoing investigation, kindly please leave the premises and continue with your day. A small schoolboy sat trembling at the side. His companion yawned and said, morning true man. With his right hand, he reached inside his pocket and pulled out a silver lighter. A flame appeared with 2 clicks, singing one end of a white stick. "Turn that off, Tanuma. I'm not going to contaminate the crime scene." Tanuma released a cloud of smoke into the atmosphere. Tsukauchi Naomasa spread the smell of nicotine with a wave of his gloved hands. "Turn it off. I need to take off the edge." Besides taking the cigarette from his partner, Naomasa stabbed it with his foot. He shot a small backlash in response to the elder man's pointless look, ignoring it. With a sigh, Tanuma raised his hands in submission. The older man slipped on his white rubber gloves and said, "Fine. Fine." Officer Tamakawa walked up to them and the woman with the cat's head instantly saluted. "Detectives." Tamuna shot off, "What are we dealing with? A murder in an alleyway hardly seems like something to call us over." Officer Tamakawa made an effort to conceal her frown. "We believe it to be QUIRK related." Tamuna's eyebrows shot up. Naomasa drew his brow. At a signal from the senior detective, Officer Tamakawa guided them down the alley. Everything Tamakawa had expected to make alleyways disagreeable to the senses was present. Refuge receptacles, the sporadic beer bottle and can left behind. Butts of cigarettes snuffed. 1 or 2 condoms that were thrown carelessly. They arrived upon the corpse at the end of the lane. The physique. Almost stopping, Naomasa took in what was in front of him. Throughout his tenure as a detective, he had witnessed multiple deceased bodies. Many deformed, fractured bodies. Some bodies were hideous, mutilated, and battered. The sight that awaited them was almost always guaranteed to be unpleasant if eccentricities had a role in a murder. Tamuna was the first to break the stillness, saying, "I don't get it. I thought this was a murder." "It is. Then why is the guy standing?" That was exactly the question Naomasa asked. The murder victim, if that was even a word to describe him, stood in a position akin to a vampire dozing in a coffin. He had his eyes closed. Naomasa's eyes could see puncture marks on his neck and his face was pale. He was dressed in a pair of jeans, a huge enormous hood and trousers. Numerous puncture scars and bloody patches, knife wounds were visible on the hood. The man in front of them was dead, there was no question about it. Naomasa amended, How is he standing?" Officer Tamakawa continued to grimace and replied, "We don't know. Some school children found him while attempting to use the alley as a shortcut. They made reports of a strange man doing something suspicious. It wasn't until we got here that we well met him." Tamuna groaned and scratched the back of his head. "Tsukauchi, what are your thoughts?" Naomasa took a quick look at the entire body. "Has anyone tried touching him?" Tamakawa, the officer, shook her head. "We weren't sure we should." Naomasa studied the man who was standing. The body was in a straight line. Inflexible. No, excellent. 90 degrees was the right angle for the man's back. Even with his eyes closed, there was something surreal and calm about him. Nevertheless, it was evident that he had been severely malnourished in the hours preceding his death. Naomasa gave the standing man a quick tap on the forehead with a single white-gloved finger. It had an instantaneous effect. The man fell to the ground like a puppet having its strings cut. Unaware that he was holding a breath, Naomasa let it out. "Do we have a positive ID?" Officer Tamakawa took a tiny notepad out of her pocket. A Tokoyakubutsu, 24 years old. QUIRK. Quick buzz. A quirk that stimulates the effects of narcotics, opioids and hallucinogens and can be transmitted via physical touch. He has a few priors for public indecency and sexual harassment. Tsukauchi looked at the man's fingers right away. His fingernails. Past the stretched fingers and reduced fingertips were dried drops of blood. Prepare the body for autopsy. We need an approximate time of death, cause of death, and tests for blood work and foreign DNA. Yes, sir. Stepping up next to him, Tamuna gazed down at the corpse. Tsukauchi, nothing was holding the body upright. So it seems. So the murderer killed him, then straightened his body? Tamuna asked, her lips clenched. With his right hand, the elderly man scratched the back of his neck. And the body remained standing for several hours, with nothing holding it up until something touched it. Naomasa remained silent. Why would they do that? Naomasa Tsukauchi, the detective, focused on his surroundings. That's what we're here to find out. A specific remark, it was unnervingly warm. She was familiar with chilly temperatures. Chewing and biting. Numbness in the fingers. Clattering of teeth. It was a false recollection, warmth. To rid herself of it, she opened her eyes. She was greeted by a ceiling fan she couldn't remember. A strange roof. An odd blanket with an odd smell. The image of a muscular man with blonde hair was emblazoned on the blue and yellow warmth-giving device. She recognized the person even. She sat there, gazing at the strange item. She noticed that she too had an unusual smell after catching a whiff in the air. The smell was that of soap. Powerful, odorless soap. Integrated antiseptic. A shower echoed softly with its stream. She threw the heat giver away. Getting up on her feet naturally. She looked at strange, foreign garments again. More of the man with the blonde hair, more of the blue and yellow. The man with blonde hair and brilliant teeth was grinning on the clothing she was wearing. The man with blonde hair, wearing boxers, gave a thumbs up with his finger. The space served as an altar to the yellow and blue man. She racked her memory for the night before. They were hazy. Unfocused. Her mind swirled faster the harder she tried to recall. The showers ceased to sound. Her eyes flitted across the space. Accurate. Sharp. A wall-mounted clock. She leaped for it. The glass shattered into little and huge fragments as the thing landed into the ground. She steadily wielded the biggest one with her right hand. The doors parted abruptly. A toned body and green hair. Water trickling down, a precisely knotted towel around the waist. The recollections came flooding back. After glancing at her, the boy looked at the wall where the clock was supposed to be. His gaze fell to the floor, where the shards of glass were scattered. His shoulders slumped as he gazed at the damaged clock, and his countenance changed. That was an All Might Collector's original Izuku Kun, she recalled. Just the smell of his reminded her. An extremely peculiar smell. I'd like to sample him. She tightened her hold on the angular glass. Unable to contain the smile that kept creeping across her face, she pulled it to her front. Her blood shot through her body like fire. Her brain overflowed with want, which flowed to her beating heart and the tips of her fingers. Lightning and electricity shot through her body. It discharged from synapses to synapses, neurons to neurons, and nerves to nerves. I want to sever him. Izuku, she said, trying out the name. The child made a gesture for his neck and rubbed the back of his head while whispering something inaudible. Try it if you can. Her gaze flicked between the boy's eyes and his bare neck. The child put his left index finger to his right ear. I can hear your heartbeat. She was also able to hear it. The beat, growing, quicker and pounding at a speed she was positive she had never heard before. Never arrived previously. Her gaze fell onto Izuku's figure once more. This time, she drank in his shape, completely. His scar-free body was something she didn't really enjoy. She was uninterested in his toned muscles. She was not moved by his remarkable physical form. Only one thing was able to do it. I want to sever him. She lifted the improvised weapon and said, I want to cut you up, Izuku-kun. I'm going to cut you up. And cut and cut and cut and cut and cut gleefully, shrieking beneath her breath, she rushed him. She raised the improvised sword and swung it down while giggling. She was lying down. How she made it to the floor was a mystery to her. Or how he knocked the weapon out of her grasp and pinned her to it. She couldn't comprehend how she ended up beneath him, his piercing gaze fixed on her. The heat in his eyes made her shudder. Cut, 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 I'm sorry about this. She felt a sting on the back of her neck. All of a sudden, she was really tired. The glass shards made uneasy clinking noises as they fell into his bin. He set down the broom, pivoted, and gazed upon the asleep child while holding a tiny, almost imperceptible black needle at the nape of her neck. He extended his hand, wound his arm twice, and then took a breath and let it out. After taking 3 steps, he grabbed his backpack and took out the books, Advanced Anatomy and Acupuncture of Acute Pains. He set the 2 volumes aside and reached deeper into the bag to find a smaller satchel. He took out the smaller satchel's contents and laid them out on the ground. Transparent corked vials filled with a scarlet liquid were stacked vertically. Each vial has a faded paper label with TRG-42 attached. Alright Izuku, you can do it. The pictures started to show up for him. Fragments of his own personal hallucinations, organizing and archiving information from his newly acquired recollections. Set off. Medication that enhances quirks. Increases quirk ability by an estimated 2 to 6 times the quirk factor. Strains and variations reveal the drug's strength or weakness. Using triggers can have negative side effects, such as increased irritation, anger, and violent tendencies. He shut his eyes. What am I to do? Separate triggers effects that increase quirks from those that make people aggressive. Make a version of trigger that functions without causing unpleasant side effects. He gave his head a swish. Problems. There have been unsuccessful attempts to distill a pure sample of trigger using modern technologies. There are theories that trigger is created one of a kind using a quirk and cannot be recreated artificially or mechanically. Since trigger is a medication created especially for people with peculiarities, human test volunteers will be needed for all types of research. His eyes darted to the girl who was unconscious, his needle stuck in the nape of her neck. A killer. She committed murder. His thoughts quarreled. But she had no control over it. If this was her quirk that made her this way, then he slapped his cheeks carelessly. Midoriya, pay attention. Concentrate. This is precisely the kind of thing you ought to cease. It's something like this that you want to avoid occurring. People become criminals because their quirks lead them down the path of villainy. People killing other people because their peculiarities force them to do so. It would go on till the cycle came to an end. Till he put a stop to it. He desired to assist her, and he would provide that assistance. She would have to assist him first, though. She is an individual. People cannot be used in experiments. She kills people. She brutally murdered someone. The very least you can do is this. But she isn't to blame. Her peculiarity we are aware. Because we're doing it for her as well, that's why we must do it. Do we? Is this truly what we're doing for other people? Midoriya forced his lips to meet firmly. He inhaled deeply and silently, holding his breath until he felt his lungs were overflowing with oxygen. Ultimately, he had concealed a homicide. He had relocated the body from its original spot on Hirohito Street to a new position. To avoid suspicion, he even made a show of making the body stand. Hopefully, the cops would be too distracted by their preoccupation with the idea that the body standing was a messenger sign to notice that it was only a pointless diversion. He lifted his right hand and gave himself a quick flick to the center of his forehead. Cut back on cortisol levels. Elevate your serotonin levels. His stress was caused by the hormone cortisol. His apprehension over the choice. Happiness hormone. Serotonin. The one he required in order to decide. Unwind. Izuku Midoriya drew a deep quiet breath. Why am I worrying so much? His laughter reverberated cheerily around the room as he laughed softly. Why was this giving me such pain? Midoriya gave a jovial humming sound. He got up with a bounce, extending his arms and legs and inhaling deeply of clean air. Glancing into his cupboard, he checked the time on his wristwatch. 5:43 in the morning. He approached the unconscious female and threw her onto the bed after lifting her up. A smile spread across his face as he cast a quick check over her unconscious form. She is attractive. She was incredibly beautiful as she slept. Less attractive than Psycho. He scanned her physique, imprinting her shape firmly in his mind. He was unaware of the girl's peculiarity. He was vaguely aware that it had to do with blood. He would have to find out exactly what her quirk did before he could test trigger on her. Midoriya called upon his own delusions. At one side, a whiteboard that was visible to him alone had the words "define purpose" written on it in an equally fictitious black marker. Formulate a hypothesis. Test a theory and get information. Examine the information. Make judgments. His first query was how trigger enhanced each person's natural quirk factor. A gene was the peculiar factor. It triggers ability to increase the quirk gene's expression beyond what an individual might normally achieve, suggests that the medicine has the ability to change a person's genetic code. Furthermore, with the emergence of quirks, the human genetic code has become much more complex because some people have entirely distinct DNA structures from others. As a result, the definition of what it meant to be a human has been jumbled. Since each person's quirk gene differs so greatly from the other, how then did this one medication account for all the potential variances and then just activate or bolster the quirk gene of different individuals? When Midoriya Izuku's head snapped up, he felt steam shooting out of his ears. His breath caught as his eyes steadily enlarged. Did she know? She was aware. She must have been aware. Psycho was aware from the start. This was not a simple task at all. It would take a deep understanding of quirk genomics, epigenetics, epidemiology, neurobiology, and pharmacogenomics to just comprehend how trigger accomplished what it did. Several fancy terms and difficult ideas that would be difficult for him to swiftly grasp as a middle school student. Months, years. It would take decades of study for the average person. It took years of perspiration, labor, and suffering to grasp the ideas. Years were required to have access to the academic information and acquire the comprehension required to even begin to know where to go for a solution. In essence, she had given a first-year chemistry student the task of reverse engineering methamphetamine from a crude sample while also taking out the addictive component. Asking a biology student in high school to do a decompressive craniectomy following his first lesson. Midoriya could feel his heart in his chest begin to beat more quickly. His eyes first fell on the pills and then on the murderer who was fast asleep. His heart started to pound more violently than before, and when it did, he made a noise he had never heard before. Am I laughing yet? He covered his mouth with his palms in an attempt to silence the odd, unnatural chuckle. It was a pointless endeavor. Ineffective. His laughing persisted, fueled by the rush of adrenaline coursing through his body. She doesn't think I'm capable of doing it. He was being tested by Psycho. She told him, as subtly as possible, that this was beyond her scope of expertise. Izuku's body trembled with a peculiar sensation he had never experienced before and his hands clenched into a fist. A feeling he couldn't recall having had previously. He clenched his teeth to stifle the sound that was on the verge of coming out of his mouth to halt the rapid heartbeat and deafening rush of dopamine. Dopamine. Izuku trembled in realization. Joy. He was being tested for the first time since acquiring his precision quirk. There was a challenge in front of him. He had to bite down on his palm to contain his laughter due to the dopamine rush that overtook his body. Sufficient to completely close his eyes and immerse himself in the endless, indescribable joy. Izuku Midoriya closed his eyes and sat on the floor, crossed his legs. His creativity was active. Psycho, the girl, was in front of him, her monocle breaking as she gave him a respectful and admiring look. With astonishment and envy. Psycho, the fictional character, bowed and acknowledged her defeat to him. In the end, she would admit to him that she had underestimated him. Promised to keep her pledge and extend her hand in full cooperation, and he will no longer require her. The idea tore him from his fantasy realm. He peered strangely up into the air, his eyes sparking open. What? Just him and the unconscious female were in the room. He was the source of the thought. It had been his thought. His brow furrowed, he squeezed his eyes shut, trying to find the source of that notion. The source of that odd, wandering thinking. In 6 months, you can double her whole net worth. If you exerted yourself, triple that. He gave a headshake. That isn't possible. Of course it's right. Sitting opposite him was another Midoriya. An internalized psychosomatic delusion. The delusion seemed, felt, and sounded real to him. The face of the second Midoriya was expressionless and blank. Psycho is smart, yes, but by her own admission, she does not understand people. She has her own goals to accomplish, but that weakness is going to end up stifling her. She does not understand illogical actions. She does not understand that a lack of good faith can have longer repercussions down the line. Midoriya's head tipped. I'm just an audio-visual representation of your thoughts without the bullshit. The side of you that's inspired by Kaken's frank bluntness but never manages to embrace it. Oh. Remarked Midoriya. That's nice. Are you a perfect human? Izuku scowled. What? We both know you heard me. But since redundancy is in session, I'll ask again, are you, Midoriya Izuku, a perfect person? The paragon of human virtues and righteousness? I strive to be. His twin gave a nod. So it stands to reason, if you are not yet perfect, you are also capable of falling into the pitfalls of non-perfect beings. It stands to reason that you are equally capable of greed, pettiness, selfishness, and anger. There was no denying the logic. Well, he said, rubbing his head. After I complete Psycho's task, I'll refuse her help out of pettiness. You want her to realize that she missed a huge opportunity. You want her to realize that her lack of faith in you was a mistake. You want her to learn that lesson and strive to do anything to correct her error. Anything. I'm not a petty person. Why would I ever want any of that? Because you want her to want you. The copy's eyes gleamed. The same way you want her. Midoriya remained silent. The doppelganger raised his hands and said, you don't believe me? As displays with pictures of Kaken appeared next to him. You get satisfaction out of beating Kaken. Only a year back, you could never dream of it. But now he can't even touch you even if he tries his hardest. You've never focused on it, but at the back of your mind, it's always there, that brief flash of satisfaction, of knowing how much you've changed from being DEKU. Knowing how much better than him you are now. That's not TR, his clone remarked, you've never let him win. Don't lie. You know you can let him win and make it appear as if he won on his own merit. Precision allows us that. If we truly wanted to, we could fake it so convincingly that Kaken would never have known that we let him win on purpose. You considered it once, but disregarded it because the truth is, Midoriya Izuku has spent his entire life chasing after and attempting to be like a boy who never wants to lose. The clone's hair turned blonde over time. Did you think that once you finally caught up to him, you would ever let him regain his place? I don't like to lose. He corrected, you phrased it wrong. You, Midoriya, like to win. He ran his hands down his face, sighing and moaning. Talking to myself like this can't be healthy. His twin's hair took on its typical green sheen once more. His doppelganger gently pointed to his head and said, should have thought about that before using precision to enhance your brain. You have a lot of hang-ups in here you need to deal with. For starters, you've been suffering from an overwhelming lack of self-conceptualization. Is that bad? You don't understand yourself fully. You don't know what you want or why you want it. He straightened his posture. I want to make the world a better place. Why? Because it's the right thing to, his clone called BZZZT. Wrong answer. Try again. He scowled. Because I don't like seeing people suffer because of their QI. His duplicate lifted a finger and said, BZZZZT. Wrong again. One more attempt. Here's a hint. You've spent your entire life being told by everyone in the world that you weren't needed. That you were useless. Your own mother felt so bad about your lack of a quirk that every time she looked at you, she fought down the urge to start weeping. Your entire life was spent in stubborn pursuit of a dream you were never sure you could attain, and your only friend was a bully who often told you to go kill yourself. So, what is the most likely reason this previously sad, lonely, bullied, socially stunted boy would decide to make the world a better place? Izuku hesitated to speak. All around him, flashbacks to his history started to play. The recordings depict Kaken hitting and putting down the younger child. He scowled at them and turned to watch other videos, including one of his mother grinning melancholy, one of the teacher ignoring his waved hands in class, and one of the students smiling as he shared his desire with the world. My dream is to become a hero. As the films got louder and louder, he clenched his teeth and felt the memory of his past mistakes creep in. Of him consuming scorching tea to see if he was prone to fire breathing. To see if he could make objects float to him, he stayed motionless for several hours, straining his right arm. Among the countless failures that followed and then the recollection of the day his quirk came into play. The blade he was holding. The willpower required. The rage. The frustration. The howl he gave off. He recalled how weak his determination had been to follow through. Recalling, he stumbled while heading back to the kitchen with the item. Recalling those fleeting moments, the knife shot far into the air before landing, blade first, squarely in the center of his forehead. Then he recalled, 2 fingers, reacting instinctively, stopping it just a millimeter short of impact. I hated. Silent was his clone. You hate. Quirks. Had quirks not existed from the beginning, his childhood would have been very different. Heroes and villains would not exist. Had he not held All Might in such high regard, the idea of never being able to measure up to his idol would not have crushed him. Wouldn't have brought his mom to that level of despair. Wouldn't have strained his relationship with Kakin. Wouldn't have driven him to such extreme measures in an attempt to earn his love, respect, and adoration. He looked over at the girl lying in bed. Could it be that her life would have been different too if there were no quirks? Would she be content living here, unconscious on a stranger's bed, or with her family? Could she ever have killed someone in cold blood, letting their blood run down her chin while she licked her lips? Because of his peculiarity, someone like Mitsuda would be able to live a life free from the fear that he would one day harass someone sexually. Suzume wouldn't have to experience the awkwardness of other people's feelings simply by existing beside them. I really wish quirks didn't exist. Then maybe it may make everyone lot happier. His delusion grinned. Observing the smile emanating from his own reflection was strange. Even more bizarre, he saw himself standing and sweeping away similarly delusional dust while experiencing complete 3-dimensional vision. I'll ask again, Izuku, what do you want? What was it he desired? I want to end the era of quirks. His delusions laughed. There we go. The illusion vanished. Let's get to work, Izuku. Her expectations for the morning were not met. The coffee she had ordered had been several degrees cooler. After falling down the stairs, one of the maids needed medical assistance. Her driver had been too preoccupied to transport the maid safely because he harbored unresolved affections for her. She was running late. Professor Hirakawa took advantage of the chance to make a verbal jab. Silently, her classmates took pleasure in the man's words. Their inaudible gratification was a more terrible manifestation of their layers of envy and self-doubt. Being 15 years old and having earned a doctorate was sufficient to break many so-called high-minded people's fragile egos. An additional black mark against her record was that she was a woman. Many professors connected their ego to their intelligence. Connected their worth to their achievements. And she materialized in front of them, a farce of all their years of research and commitment. A reminder of their tiny, hyper-focused, and restricted intelligence. Professor Miyazaki asked, his fist steepled, do you understand why you are here, Intelli-san? Beneath was her article. Do you know why I've called you to my office? Her favorite author was Professor Miyazaki. Maybe just because he had a different perspective than the others. There was something more tying his ego. Her gaze settled on his desk, displaying the image of the man wearing a straw hat and Hawaiian shirt, his arms encircling a younger lady dressed in a sundress, with a smaller, younger girl sandwiched between them. Not quite old enough to be his daughter, yet not quite old enough to be his grandchild either. She was aware that it was untrue. The bond was explained by the rings that matched hers and his finger. I assume it has something to do with my essay. Lifting the papers, he patted it with the back of his palm and said, it has everything to do with your essay. What is the meaning of this, Intelli-san? Her mouth twitched. Her gaze was fixed idly on the documents. Dotted them with red ink. Circles over circles. You'll have to be more specific, Professor. Scholar Miyazaki returned the documents to the table. The assignment was to debate the ethicality of quirk marriages and highlight the potential long-term consequences on society. I know what the assignment was, Professor. Professor Miyazaki's voice soared, then why? Why have you submitted a thesis arguing in favor of quirk eugenics? The professor's tone caused her lips to narrow. I would kindly you refrain from increasing your voice around me, Professor Miyazaki. She warned Professor Miyazaki, but she disregarded it. Explain yourself, Intelli-san. Describe yourself. How awfully sick of those orders she was. Those guidelines. Describe this. This defies my understanding. Could you explain this to me? How did you solve this problem? Her whole life had been an excruciating process of giving explanation after explanation. She became bored with it. Finished with it. Always having to explain the obvious. With dissecting ideas that she quickly grasped, digesting, swallowing, and regurgitating them as palatable food for other people, much like a bird nourishing defenseless, young hatchlings. Eugenics are a set of beliefs and practices that aim to improve the genetic quality of a human population, typically by excluding people and groups judged to be inferior and promoting those judged to be superior. She cited. I know what eugenics are, Intelli-san. Her mouth quirked. Then, she started. You should understand that quirk marriages are in line with that belief. Two individuals marry with the intention of producing offspring born with a mix of their favorable traits, or in this case, quirk. This increases the genetic quality of that offspring, who can then engage in another quirk marriage and further amplify their genetic quality further. The professor dismissively waved his hand. And if you'd read my essay with a more objective mind rather than utterly dismissing it because of a single buzzword, Professor, she continued, you would have seen where I advocated for the promotion of positive eugenic policies. A society of individuals with highly complementary quirks being incentivized to reproduce. Individuals with unique genetic compositions and immunities being bred with others of equally advantageous genes, Professor Miyazaki exclaimed, bred, Intelli. For God's sakes, being agitated over semantics. She gave a tongue click. She asked, what are quirk marriages if not selective breeding? For countless generations, humans have used artificial selection to develop new organisms with desirable characteristics for our benefit. We've bred chickens to produce larger eggs, cows to produce more milk, plants to be softer, more digestible with greater yields, and even dogs. We've bred dogs for no reason, except to remove or preserve physical characteristics or mental behaviors that work to our benefit. Hushed, she tried to relax herself. It's both pointless and hypocritical to suddenly cry foul when I propose to do the same thing to ourselves what we have done to countless other species for thousands of years. Professor Miyazaki stroked his head's sides. We aren't animals, Intelli-san. False. She corrected, Professor, we are the smartest animals. Set aside anthropocentric ego and consider the benefits, Professor. There are individuals whose genetic physiology has been so heavily modified by their quirks that certain human illnesses no longer affect them. Individuals immune to fevers and colds, immune to poisons, toxins or venoms, immune to fatal diseases and viruses. If we bred these individuals so all of mankind and humanity could share in those advantages, Professor Miyazaki cut him off, saying, and the rest of us, Intelli-san. The quirkless, those whose quirks make them more susceptible to injuries or disease, and those whose quirks would bring about more disadvantages than benefits. What happens to them? His eyes darted to the photograph on the desk, ever so briefly. She adjusted her monocle and remarked, they are free to live their lives. I'm simply saying they should not be allowed to reproduce. Miyazaki, the professor, shook his head. So, you would implement policies of forced sterilization. She agreed, saying yes. Unfavorable traits should not be allowed to advance. The quirk that makes one more susceptible to disease or makes one frail and sickly with no quantifiable advantages. Why should we let such quirks continue to exist? Professor Miyazaki stated, the human right to reproduction. In defiance of her better judgment, she laughed. She laughed a little more at the professor's shocked expression, but then stopped herself. Forgive me, Professor, but you and I are more than aware that human rights are more or less guidelines than an absolute law. Here in Japan, the government establishes laws or ignores actions that counteract multiple human rights on a daily basis. She lifted a finger. Right to fair trial and presumption of innocence. Constantly counteracted by the Professional Hero Association. Several individual villains suspected of belonging to the followers of one have been sent to Tartarus without a trial because the government tries its hardest to suppress anything about them. She lifted her other digit. Right to freedom of thought, conscience and religion. Constantly disregarded by the government. Churches of one have been closed down, attacked, and members arrested simply for believing that there is a messianic figure who has the power to give and take away quirks. She lifted her middle finger. Right to freedom of opinion and expression. Constantly ignored. Destro was persecuted for his ideals of a society where the government does not police our quirks. It is nearly impossible to get a permit to use your quirk for personal commercial profit or for larger entertainment purposes. Street performers have been arrested simply for using their quirks in controlled manners in public spaces. She lifted her index finger. Right to work in just and favorable conditions. Dismissed because several employers hire based on quirks. The wage gap that shows that individuals with more versatile or specialized quirks earn 6 times more on average than individuals with weaker quirks and 10 times more than quirkless individuals. The last digit. Right to freedom from discrimination. Dismissed, in various ways. The quirk purism movement has been on the rise, advocating that those born with animalistic features and traits are less human than those who do not have any visible animalistic physical characteristics. She clenched her hand. Let us also not forget the discrimination against quirkless individuals. Mito vs Arashi th case of a quirkless woman who lost her job to a man because he had a quirk that let him do the same work 3 times as fast. As you know, she lost the case and was later countersued for everything she had. While lazily combing away strands of her hair, Psycho inhaled deeply. Professor, if you cannot see that the system we currently live in is already an unorganized mess barely hanging on by a thin thread, then there is nothing else I have to say. She rose from the chair, straightened her skirt, and gave the professor a small nod before swinging her handbag over her right shoulder. I do, truly, enjoy our discussions, Professor Miyazaki. She replied. Unfortunately, you're too deeply entrenched in your love of humanity that you are blinded by your belief in it. We are not living in a just world, Professor. This world has always been unjust, and I am suggesting that rather than attempt the impossible to make it just, we simply optimize the unjustness. Maximize the injustice, Professor Miyazaki stated once more. Like any woman, she curtsied. Good day, Professor. She took one more look at the photo resting on the professor's desk. Maybe it's a love of some folks and not all of humanity. Breathing out, IntelliPsycho departed the office. As far as teaching ethics was concerned, Professor Miyazaki was a kind man, but regrettably, he had small biases of his own. She could understand, of course, in certain aspects. And some, she was unable to. For that, she admired him. She was furious with him for that. Of course, there was the little child she'd met so lately, the one she thought to have the same unwavering moral code. She couldn't help but wonder if meeting Midoriya would pique her interest in her professor. She was certain that they would have a topic of conversation despite their disparate educational backgrounds. Her phone beeped twice in her purse. When she saw the words unknown caller, her mouth thinned as she reached for it. Yes. How is the most annoying young heiress in the world doing? It was a female voice. Youthful. She selected the words, phrases, and tone. Broker. Why, you're quick on the uptake. That's a little scary, Intelli-sama. Not even my own girlfriend could recognize me so quickly. She gave her nose a rub. I've been expecting your call. Have you now, Intelli-sama? Then I suppose you are aware that you and I have a score to settle. Her mouth quirked. Do we? Those fools at the Meta Liberation Army wouldn't be able to deduce my location even if they had the bloody Oracle of Delphi in their possession. Well, maybe Curious could do it, I've always hated the nosy types like her. But as they don't have any person with Sir Night-Eye powers, the only other way they'd know is if they went to their resident human quantum computer. Her mouth quirked even more. Fascinating theory. Is this the so-called genius intuition of the underworld's greatest broker? Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. Regardless, Oju-sama, you've managed to actually piss me off. That's a mighty impressive thing to do, I admit. She twitched her monocle. And I take it you want financial compensation. This isn't about the money. It's about reputation. I mean, now you've got me running around in a girl's body to avoid Redestro's goons. It worked well enough until so many annoying fuckers started walking up to me with bullshit pickup lines. Do you know how stressful it is to be a young beautiful woman? I can only imagine what that must feel like. It's annoyingly stressful. The lesbian sex isn't all that either. Though the multiple orgasms are definitely worth it. Ah, I know, Oju-sama, how about we meet at a certain love hotel? Just two girls having fun together. You do realize I'm underage. You do realize I'm a criminal. I'll be cutting this call if you don't tell me what you really want, broker. TSK. TSK. Testy. Is it that time of the month already? Was that the most original insult you could think of? Considering you are, as you claim, also in a girl's body. Point. Alright, Oju-sama. I'll come clean. You're a smart lass. There's no way you would have helped Redestro track me down without knowing it was going to come back and bite you in the ass. So that meant you did it to get my attention. I get that the Intelli Corporation and the Detmerit Company have a partnership, but you're not a villain. So, why does little Miss Smarty Pants need my attention so desperately? Her lips were squeezed together. Because, you know he's real. You have information on him. Information on who? God. Sorry, Princess the One. The broker remained quiet. The voice said, you're joking. You Oju-sama, you have no fucking idea what you're dealing with. I know it said, you don't fucking know. The noise required her to take the phone out of her ear. Listen, and listen good Oju-sama. No matter how smart you think you are, all that is fucking pointless when you meet him. He's been in this game since before you were born, since before I was born. If you expect me to give you information on the fucking king of the underworld, you're batshit crazy. His name. Did you just fucking hear me? His name. She said one again. And then, I'll owe you two favors. One, for setting Redestro on you, and the other, for getting me his name. The broker did not say anything for a few seconds. 2 favors, huh? 2 favors from the heiress of the Intelli fortune. You think that's worth more than my life? I believe it might be worth a consideration. Things are going to change in the oncoming months, and I believe yourself to be of the gambling sort. Money may not interest you, but information, secrets, and perhaps, quirks may. Quirks. Nobody said anything. Ah. So that's what this is about. I thought the government scrapped that operation. She remained silent. Giving him that much information was a risk. A calculated risk. The seconds passed by pointlessly. Every one nearly more excruciating than the previous. His name was necessary. Despite searching and studying for years, she was never able to uncover even the smallest indication of it. She threw all of her intelligence into the effort, following ethereal traces and coming to dead end after dead end. Myth and rumors had their bounds, but she would just need to know his name to locate him. Over the phone, the broker laughed. "Alright, Oju-sama. You drive a hard bargain. But I'll tell you now that I don't know his name. No one is old enough to remember his real name." Her mouth twisted. "That can't be," broker said. "I didn't finish." In his voice. "What I do know is what he goes by. What he's called in his inner circle. It's a name that very little have heard and still remain alive." Her heart began to beat more quickly as time went on. Yes. All. 4. 1. She felt shivers down her spine. It was as though something clicked in her brain. Unlocked. The vague mist that was hovering above it suddenly lifted. She clenched her teeth and held the side of her head, nearly stumbling as the crushing dizziness struck. What? Everybody. 4. 1. When she thought of the word a second time, a sharp pain shot through her brain, causing her to stumble as if something heavy had struck her from behind. Immediately, her throat became dry. She could not get air into her lungs. Hey. You still alive, Oju-sama?" She could hardly make out the voice or the words. She tightly gripped the phone and forced herself to release a trembling breath. What was that?" "Ha ha ha ha," exclaimed the broker. A harsh, unpleasant chuckle that was irritating. "You're among a select group of people who know that name and still live. Congratulations, Oju-sama." "What was that?" she questioned angrily, raising her voice. "You know what it was. You just can't accept it. Some people's quirks let them spit fireballs or amplify their intelligence. Others let them instantly kill people 1,000 miles away when they utter 3 words and have a specific idea in mind." Her chest grew cold. That's preposterous. For you and for me, maybe. But for someone who has been collecting and combing quirks for more than 7 generations. Broker laughed. "That's just Tuesday." Her heart felt like it was about to explode. "Considering you're still alive, it means you don't think of him as an enemy. That's good for me. I don't know what possessed you to go this far, but you're already balls deep in this. Too late to turn back now." Stifling. It was a stuffy air. "2 favors, Oju-sama. I'll be calling to collect them. Try not to die before I do." There was a click to end the call. XXXX somewhere else he detested it. The management of such trivial assignments and issues that belong in his organization to people of lesser rank. His gloved hands raked against the hive outbreak, his skin itching as he scraped his neck. "I hate this place." "Why is that, Ani-chan?" Gasping through his mask, he inhaled. "It irritated me to see the men dressed in blue. The well-being submitting to the illness. The worst of them were the idiots who had ceded control and independence to the sick so they could do their jobs. Due to a misplaced sense of efficacy and modernism, their competency and capacity to perform their tasks have drastically decreased. The structure itself was an embarrassment. Their duties had shifted from apprehending criminals and enforcing the law to gathering already arrested offenders and defending the government's interests. Ani-chan. Ani-chan. Stop ignoring me." The girl next to him puffed up her cheeks as she walked. He would not admit to having amusement in his eyes. She dressed according to her own preferences. A little yukata and sophisticated Jetta sandals. She inherited the grace and predilections of a lady descended from a Triakuza member, despite the legacy skipping a generation due to her incompetent father and ungrateful mother. "We have work to do." Once more, she crossed her arms and pouted. "You're gonna buy me ice cream for ignoring me, Ani-chan. Chocolate or vanilla?" She chirped, "Chocolate." He nodded his head in agreement. "I'll buy you an entire ice cream shop. Will that be enough? Will I get to boss them around like Gigi and make them feed me ice cream? If that's what you want. Yay," she said, raising her fist high. "You're the best, Nai-chan. Get to work," he declared. Then pleasure. His hands tucked into his pockets, he stepped in through the front door. As soon as they saw him, a few of the blue-clad men instinctively grabbed at their belts. He snorted and walked right up to them, without giving them any attention. Halt. You there, you look suspicious." The mask was the culprit. He was aware of it. But he was not going to ignore it. He refused to breathe the same air that contained filth. He refused to allow their sickness to worsen. He took his hands out of his pockets and held them up. He remarked nonchalantly, "I'm no one suspicious. I wanted to ask if you've seen my 8-legged friend. He likes to pretend to be a spider, but his heart is dark and inky, so we often say he's an octopus." The 2 men winced. Chisaki gave an ear snort. Maybe he was to blame. He had heard from Ironaka repeatedly that he needed to appear more often so that people would recognize his presence. He had ignored it. His body was only an instrument. It didn't matter how he looked. He possessed the ability to shape and alter it as he pleased. Why would they want to etch into their memory a face that would soon fade? The police officers instantly bent their heads. "Oyabun, we weren't prepared for you," they said, glancing at the girl sitting next to him. "Nor were we expecting the priestess herself." Pride whirled around the girl. His irritated eyes twitched as he declined. This was a result of her fixation on wearing traditional attire, which frequently had Maiko-style ensembles. She'd been called a besotted idiot once, and she wouldn't take it personally from anyone else. "One of the outer bullets was killed," he stated. "I'm here for the body." The police officer to the right winced. "We heard about an unusual murder case." One nodded to the left. The man wiped his throat. "I thought it was just a simple drug dealer. We didn't know he was right this way, Oyabun." To attract less attention, an entrance through the parking lot was utilized. The men had a shaky step, occasionally looking back at him, but they never looked him in the eye. He monitored multiple cameras in the area, gradually detecting and tracking their movements. He continued to itch his neck, growing irritated all the while. "Naichin." She tugged at his jacket's hem. Her eyes were serious. "I figured." The two men's attempts were anything but discreet. And neither were the others, huddled alongside cars and behind pillars, their breathing sluggish and uneven, and their vests bulletproof. His annoyance increased because he was positive he had not communicated to anyone why he was planning to show up to this police station today, at this time, for this reason. It implied that he was up against an opponent of at least a B rank in Keta 3. The two best options were a precog or a Sherlock. He briefly wondered if Nezumi, the demon, was responsible, but he soon dismissed the idea. The demon was in his castle, and it was not often that he assisted police enforcement. Maybe the best Sherlock in the nation was Nezumi. The greatest precog might be Sir Night-Eye. They were both astute enough to realize that he could never be apprehended by regular police personnel or the few minor illnesses his senses could detect in the vicinity. A third party, then. Maybe a new player forming an alliance with the police. Just as a dark blur came onto the scene, the police officers started scurrying for shelter. The female next to him exclaimed, "Yua. Bunny. Look. Look. Nai-chan, it's a bunny." The bunny said, "Woo." Made it just in time. With a fierce smile and rabbit ears protruding from her head, she had a dark complexion. He re-examined his analysis of the circumstances. Probably a Sherlock. They had a sneaking suspicion he was coming. It was just a feeling. An estimate. They expected someone, but he was not the one. Because if they had known about him beforehand, they would not have sent a melee warrior. The melee fighter would have been wise to avoid showing up right before the last minute. He'd had enough. He gestured to the girl with his left hand free of the glove. "Eerie. Your hand." "Right, Naichin." The girl rabbit gave a snarl. "Hey, what do you think you're?" When he first started practicing his quirk, he had to completely disassemble and reassemble each person's constituent atoms in order to use their quirk. He had reached a point where, after decades of training and expertise, he just needed to make physical contact and make sure that each of their unique atoms touched one another to make them appear to be one single person. It was rumored that the king could grant or take peculiarities with a single touch. Chisaki Kai had nothing to give or take. All he had to do was use. Revise. And he put it to use. The heroes were gone. The officers disappeared. Night gave way to day again. His watch's hands continued to rotate backward before abruptly stopping. A van came to a sharp screech only millimeters from impact. The internal driver gave him a wide-eyed glare. Wow, what the hell? Where did they come from? His gaze quickly focused on the van. He used his strength to break the atomic links that united Eerie and him, giving the girl a gentle push as she staggered. Onichin, I'm sleepy." As anticipated. She was not yet old. Expanding further. It required all of her energy to use her magic. For him, Eerie was more valuable than gold since he had the rare ability to eradicate the sick from this world. More in value than a diamond. There was nothing on earth that could match the girl's preciousness. He gently patted the earth and pressed her up against it. "Ice cream, you promised Nichin." When he was finished, he would have her reward ready for her. He redirected his focus to the officers inside the van. One of them came over, holding a baton. "Sir, I don't know how you and your child got in here, but all it took was one grab." The man could not keep up his pace. Chisaki closed his eyes as he focused, his palm covering the man's head. Matter and the brain remained matter. And he had the ability to control matter. It had taken Chisaki 1,000 lives, maybe 10,000, to master this art, so finesse was required for this work. Overhaul. A human brain revamp would include instantaneously disassembling and reassembling it with notable modifications. making connections where none had yet been made, implanting neurons that would light up when specific codes were uttered, and honing it until it was just another medicine he could give to sick people. The man sagged down and blinked as he let go of him. "Ah, Overhaul-sama, what can I do for you?" A dead body ushered in today. "Bring it to me." "As you command, Overhaul-sama." There should be vials of trigger accompanying him as evidence. "Bring those as well." Chisaki was left alone with his thoughts as the new peon hurried to fulfill his duties. One of his outer bullets had been a tokoyakibutsu. By no means did he lack skill, in fact, his covert role as a drug dealer was only meant to carry out the real work of field testing and distributing a unique batch of trigger. TRG-42 was an experimental batch that had 6 times the chance of addiction and 14 times the potency of standard trigger. The goal of the drug was to permanently alter a person's mental state. Otoko's eccentricity made him the ideal facilitator. Chisaki was, for the most part, unconcerned with the batch. It was an experiment designed as a side project to see how likely the QUIRK burnout theory was to hold true. He wouldn't mind too much if it rotted away in a police evidence locker. But he did want to know who had murdered the distributor. Otoko was a promiscuous man, prone to his own vices, yet he was far from unfit for battle. When used effectively, his peculiarity might make him a very lethal opponent. Was his demise a result of misfortune, or was it predestined? Was there someone out there pursuing him from the start? Whichever the situation, Chisaki Kai would discover the truth. He would track down and destroy the offending party. Because he was the remedy for the universal illness and it was a very, very sick planet. The sound of metal hitting plastic reverberated as the empty aluminium can fell into the trash. "I remember." "How was it?" inquired the girl. Excitement was causing him to titter and feel uneasy in his stomach. Everyone was just trying to kill time and the event hadn't even started yet. The simplest icebreaker was quirks, as usual. Their purposes. Their capacities. Where they came from. Funny childhood memories that are relevant and intriguing backstories. If you had a strong peculiarity, you were liked by many. If you had a risque oddity, popular. Popular if you possessed a quirky quality that was merely visually or orally pleasant. The word fell out of his mouth, fine. Her brown eyes revealed the laborious apparent death of excitement. Just fine. His mouth opened to reply sharply, but it was cut off before it could. A different girl almost exactly the same as the disappointed one came closer. "Ignore her," the girl who was objectively smarter said. "Nissan, come on." His quirk, "I mean, it's one more word and I'm shaving our head. Why you wouldn't dare keep talking, and those dreams of wild hair-pulling flings you keep having are going to remain just that." First girl let out a moan. She poked her tongue out and said, "Ugh. I hate you. Spoilsport." The first girl meandered off and mixed with the people in the throng. She went up to another boy who seemed about his age. He snuggled up and awkwardly spoke to a hamster on his shoulder, but as soon as the obnoxious female snuck up on him, he sprang out of his skin. With incredible speed, a little swarm of insects appeared and formed a barrier. The female in front of him sighed, "That dolt. I apologize for my sister's situation. She seemed to be searching for a phrase that would adequately express her feelings. She was unsuccessful. He softly inclined his head in comprehension. A second later, when the girl yelped, swearing under her breath, he arched a brow. Her arm had a tiny trail of marks on it. He saw the bites of insects. Bite of an insect, but not a single insect seen. For a brief moment, he fixed her gaze, and she noticed it. "Ah," she said with a stuttering laugh. She cleared her throat, saying, "Don't worry, I'm used to it. At least we aren't joined at the hip, you know. I heard it's a thing. Twins born with the same body. Conjoined twins, I think." She was shaking. Now that would be the real nightmare. He managed to give himself a tiny, indifferent groan. "Wow, calm down, we've barely just met and you're giving me so much personal details. What do you want?" Her arms were crossed. "Your name, for starters. I'm not here to make friends." Her eyes rolled. "I'm asking for your name, not your eternal loyalty." He gave her a few moments of intense stare. "Shinso." He consented to. "Shinso Hitachi." Her eyes sparked with recognition. She made an effort to conceal it. She smiled at him and remarked, "See, that wasn't so hard. To think the emperor of Nabu Middle School could be such a friendly guy." His digits quivered. His lips became wet and dry, his tongue became faster and slower, and his mind worked quickly and slowly at the same time as he thought about what he would say or do next. But the surrendering motion, she raised her hand and said, Whoa, relax. I'm not looking for trouble. My sister and I are here, just like you, just like everyone, for the same reason. We aren't enemies." Her glance darted to him and back again, then back to her sister. The boy with the rock head's little hamster chewed on her sister's index finger and he saw as the girl's finger developed the same wound. She gave him a little obviously annoyed smile while gritting her teeth. "On second thought, consider her your enemy. I really would appreciate it if someone could whisper into her ear to make her stop doing stupid things for just 1 second. She sighed after sucking on her bleeding finger. Sorry Hitachi-san, give me a minute. Muttering under her breath, she marched off and punched her sister in the arm. When both of the girls flinched at the same time, Shinso's eyebrow quirked. A brief, strange exchange of pinches and firm pats followed, which came to an abrupt end when one girl slapped the other's chest. Shortly after, both strode off in the same direction, still giggling and clutching their arms about their chests. He found amusement in the sight, as did a few others who had assembled in this peculiar location. His comic relief quickly faded as he recalled how he had come to be here and the exact words that had turned him off to the younger sibling. Do you remember when you first activated your quirk? She had questioned him. Such a harmless query. Like he could ever forget. He recalled the day. The instant. Brightly, etched with laser-like focus into the recesses of his memory. The image of that moment merry surface in his thoughts every time he closed his eyes. Of those sketchy perilous moments. He recalled the doctor's office, the hospital, and the sickening smell of bleach and manufactured cleanliness. The peaceful quiet anxiety and the sterile air. It's not possible that that is correct, his mother had replied. He recalled how her gaze flickered from his father to the doctor as she gripped her purse with trembling hands. That can't be right at all. No, I don't believe it. She had stumbled and repeated what she had said. His dad had reached into a steeple with his hands. He didn't say anything. Terrifyingly quiet and unsettling. I apologize, Shinso-san, the physician had remarked. He repositioned his circular-brimmed glasses and brushed aside his ridiculous mustache on his chubby body. But surely you must have noticed something before now. Incidents that seemed to resolve themselves easily. Or perhaps certain requests being accepted more likely than not. His mother had licked her lips and said, Her lips pulled firmly together as she said, I was always fairly attractive growing up so I just assumed. Her head sank into her hands gradually. Oh my god. Maruta-sensei, his father had uttered. Chilly. Stern. Are you certain of what you're saying? He recalled how the doctor had used just one push of his index finger to fix his spectacles. Absolutely. Honey, listen, believe me, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. His father had stated, 9 years. For 9 years. Since we met in high school. I always wondered why I could never say no to you. He recalled the cracking of his mother's voice. I swear I didn't know. He recalled the growl of his father. How can you not fucking know you have a quirk? He couldn't help but recall that it was the first time he had ever heard Shinso Kageaki swear. The first time his father stood up, his eyes flaming with resentment. Love might turn into complete hatred with such ease. He wasn't to blame. Nor was it the fault of his mother. His father had labeled her over the years as either that manipulative slut or that lying bitch. For some reason, his father didn't think his mother hadn't told him about her peculiarity. Even Shinso was unsure about whom to believe. A piece of him recalled her naive entreaty, the gaze that sought his approval. Subsequently, he had discreetly heard her remarks creep into his thoughts. Trust me. Please. Trust me. Trust me. Did you know? It was an easy question to ask. Just one query. Just a second. Just a moment. His mom's gaze shifted. The breath of his father stopped. The physician twirled his mustache with more than a hint of professional indifference. The little moments that ensued after he asked himself that one question had a considerably more rapid and chaotic impact on his life than he had ever imagined. She did not respond. His quirk was unable to do it at the time. Then, she was unaware of that. The inability to force someone to respond to queries. If she had known that information, he wondered if things would have turned out differently. Had she attempted, with such desperation, to ignore those 3 words? Hello everyone. He was startled out of his concentration by 2 words that came from the center stage. At last, one by one, the hall lights flickered on. The platform was raised, and upon it perched a strange, shifting sliver of purple blackness, shaped like a human. Wearing a dapper suit, his gloved hands pressed and adjusted the microphone for the man standing next to him, who appeared even more bizarre than the purple wisp. The man's face and body were covered in a variety of hands. His face was hidden by the hands, revealing only his shaggy grayish-blue hair. Leaning back nonchalantly upon a metal chair was his lanky frame. The man stepped forward, tapping the microphone with lengthy, sluggish gestures. Haro, Avre 1, he uttered once more in halting English. Hey, Kurigiri, can they hear me? Is this mic broken? Kurigiri, the ghostly man, accepted what appeared to be a bow. I believe they can all hear you, Shigaraki-sama. Rido. He exclaimed once more, slamming his palms. Hello. Exclaimed the individual identified as Shigaraki. I'm very happy that all of you here decided to accept my invitation. I knew the forum was large, but even I didn't think this many people would show up. He laughed out loud. See, Kurigiri. The internet has its uses. I told you they'd show up. I told you. A female exclaimed, you said there would be free food and drinks. Fingers snapping, Shigaraki did so. He looked at the purple haze and said, that's right. Food and drinks. So, Kurogiri. Where are the refreshments? Vaporous dense purple smoke billowed from various areas of the space. Tables with boxes of pizza, fries, drink, and other western junk food spilled over began to appear. Shinso noticed the red cups that seemed to have booze written in a scribbled handwriting and labeled with paper tape. Now we're talking. Awesome. With more speed than Shinso had ever seen, a few people made their way to the food stands. The air in the room seemed to lighten within minutes and nearly everyone was chewing on something or had something in their hands or lips. Shinso wasn't sure if that was when the complimentary food was first offered. He was uncertain if it was the more enigmatic Kurogiri standing next to him or the friendly-sounding Shigaraki. He took a quick look around the room and noticed the shift in the atmosphere before forcing himself to inhale deeply and sharply. Are you in control? His quirk was activated by the default question. He looked it over. He had to be aware. He discovered that he was still in charge. There were no external forces pressing down on his thoughts. Nothing unusual that might have made him alert came to his attention. He was here for the same reason as everyone else. Due to the fact that a knot of discomfort tightened in his gut. Why have I come here? The uneasy feeling intensified when he had another question cross his thoughts. How have I arrived here? A request for participation. He had received an invitation. In what way? On the internet. Indeed. On the internet. Among the many forums he visited. An online forum that was frequently called toxic, hateful, discriminatory, and so on has been repeatedly banned but continued to exist under numerous identities. It was initially, then Quirkator synonymous. Com, and finally. Helping Hands was the username of a user that posted the thread. A lengthy story about the negative effects of making others expect peculiarities from them. A furious tirade from someone who, due to a quirk, was unable to fulfill his dream of being a hero. Once again, there was a contentious and possibly harmful influx of responses from those with unpleasant or downright evil traits, bemoaning their dislike for those who were born superior to them. He recalled leaving a remark on the forum. Grumbling to the throng about his personal issues. Then the odd connection came back to him. By Helping Hands was posted. The query posed was if they would be prepared to go above and beyond to make a difference. I wanted to know if they were tired of things. He recalled making the invitation click. Selecting the invitation. There was a link in the invite. The next thing he recalled was throwing away his drink in a trash can in a big hall full of various people. His eyes sprung open as soon as he released his mental grip, darting frantically about the room. His mouth was about to open when he sensed someone was watching him from behind. I hope you will not do anything needless, the man, whose name he thought was Kurogiri, said as he placed a gloved hand on his shoulder. I am aware of how your quirk works, Shinso-san. And do believe I can teleport you 100,000 feet over the Pacific sooner than you can utter a single word. Slowly the saliva began to form in his throat and he swallowed it. You really are a pretty anxious youngster, Kurogiri remarked, sounding a little sympathetic. I suppose it is understandable, considering your family background. Shinso winced. I almost marvel to think what sort of individual you would be had you grown up with ambitionless parents, Kurogiri said with a sigh. But then again, such a thing was never possible. Adults have power over children, and to be an adult with power over a child with the power to command other adults. That power would be used, one way or another. A gentle exhale left the man's mouth. After all, what are children, if not living representations of one's self-serving desire? Kurogiri took a step ahead of him. It was the first time Shinso observed the man's height. His eyes were merely two yellow flames floating in the purple mist that covered his face, but they conveyed an oddly deep range of emotion. Alleviate loneliness, provide purpose or seek immortality through genetic transcendence. Everyone in this room only exists because someone else was selfish. No one brings a child into this world for its own sake. Speaking, he didn't trust himself. Didn't think he would say anything at all. The man's quickness was undeniable to him. Did not question that the instant he attempted to exploit his quirk, he would be somewhere else. Shigaraki cried out, Kuroagi-eri. Across the room. We need to get started. The odd, ethereal figure of a guy stood to his full height and adjusted his necktie nonchalantly. The last look reached Shinso, of course, Shigaraki-sama. I was just making sure there would be no distractions. The message was very evident. Shinso could feel the perspiration trickle down his brow. For a brief moment, he realized he was beyond his league. Absurdly, seriously, and dangerously over his league. So, said the man going by the name of Shigaraki. Who here loves videogames? A number of hands up, unoccupied by food or beverages. Shigaraki gave a hand clap. Excellent. I'm a gamer myself. Helping Hands is my handle. Feel free to watch my streams, he said. So, one of my favorite genre of video games is RPGs. I always loved RPGs. Epic music. Tons of lore. Sweet gear. And the grind, the hours of grind is just so rewarding. Shigaraki stood up with a hop. But. A strange man with a hand mask started scratching his neck, appearing like a hippie. One thing I really hate, is how the heroes always win. A few people in the audience laughed and whispered to each other. Shigaraki remarked, come on, we all know the villains are cooler, right? They're cooler. Better looking. They've got epic stats and great armor. Complete with heartbreaking motives and backstories as to how they found themselves as villains, but none of that matters. They're about to get beaten by some goody two-shoes who had everything from wise old mentors to ancient prophecies backing them from the get-go. Shigaraki raised her voice. But who supports the villains? Where the hell are the mentors giving wise tips for the guy who wants to blow up the planet, or the Lady of the Lake offering up an evil magic sword that deals double damage to good guys when wielded by those with hearts of darkness? Where are the prophecies that announce a villain's ascension and victory, and the fortunate ex machina that shows up at the moment when they're about to be downed? Someone said, excuse me, a boy with a black head that resembled a bird. I thought this meeting was about quirks. How does this have anything to do with most of us having negative-looking quirks or quirks we don't want? Shigaraki laughed aloud. Shigaraki's hands went out, don't tell me you don't see it, kid. We are all villains. The whispers multiplied tenfold. Several of them had grievances. What the hell? That's not funny. We're not villains. Shigaraki stood up straight. Something appeared to shift about him. He loomed large over the space. So much so that, even though the shadow butler was physically higher than him, Kurogiri seemed to be a backdrop next to him. Shigaraki started, stop me if any of this is wrong. You wanted to be a hero from the beginning. You wanted, more than anything, to be like the heroes of your dreams. You looked up to one hero or another, but one day, you woke up and realized the gap is insurmountable. Shinso's mouth tightened as he noticed other individuals lowering their heads. Or all you ever wanted was to live normal lives. To be given the same amount of recognition or treatment as people with fancier, flashier, or more powerful quirks. You never had far dreams. All you wanted was fairness, a bit of equality. A few more folks looked away. Or, you're just tired of being told you'd make a great villain over and over again with your quirk. Or tired of seeing the light die out of people's eyes once you tell them your gift and they realize that they were talking with someone who didn't hit the jackpot on the gene lottery. Or worse, you're someone who struck out on it entirely and now, you're best known as a freak. Shigaraki became more visible. Or, you just want to live life without having your quirk stopping you from enjoying its tiny pleasures. You'd rather be quirkless than live as you currently do. But you can't and you hate it, you hate your quirk. You think you hate your quirk, but not really. You just hate how others have better quirks, how people value you based on something decided before you're born and can't change. Stillness. Deep, quiet. Disadvantaged. Frustrated. Unfulfilled. Misunderstood. Mislabeled. They saw Shigaraki's mouth spread wide in a smile for the first time. Like all proper villains. Shinso tightened his jaw. Heroes, a blur passed by. The blur so quick he could hardly believe it. Let him speak, Kurogiri. Shigaraki let him speak. The world was the blur, he realized. He took front stage. Stood before the individual identified as Shigaraki. His chest was filled with the rapid pounding of his heart. Suddenly the words flowed out. Heroes also start, disadvantaged, frustrated, and unfulfilled. There's no rule that says it only applies to villains. Shigaraki said nothing. His neck was scratched by his right hand. It itched all the time, and that was the only sound that could be heard in the whole space. Heroes also start off that way, you say? He said, making a noise akin to laughter. Do you have any examples of such heroes? Shinso opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Perhaps the number 3 hero Hawks. Let me see, he was picked up as a child and trained by the government since he could spell his name. Born with a versatile quirk, so he's out. Maybe the number 2 hero, Endeavor. Shigaraki chuckled. He's known as one of the strongest flame quirk users. He didn't start from a disadvantaged position. So, maybe, you're thinking about the no. 1 hero, All Might. Shigaraki's mouth turned up. Do you believe a person who can clear the weather with a punch started out frustrated, unfulfilled, misunderstood and disadvantaged? Shigaraki did not give him a chance to respond. Instead, he faced the hallway. No hero has ever come from a truly disadvantaged position. The genes, powerful parents, inherited wealth, a sage-like mentor, and in a lot of stories, a prophecy, all guiding their path. The man faced him once more. There are no heroes, truly born from nothing. Shigaraki turned around and faced the room again. But villains. Anyone can be a villain. A female exclaimed, why would anyone want to be a villain? From behind them. Shigaraki snapped his fingers at those words. Because it pays. Additional violet entryways emerged from the overhead. Thousands and thousands of yen in cash poured into the room. Because it's fun. Games. Games. Systems. Jewels. Devices. Wristwatches. As the opulent objects trickled down, the room disintegrated into a frenzy of activity as individuals scrambled to seize each one. Because you can do whatever you want. He snapped his fingers again, and another gateway materialized, this one adorned with a sizable printed banner bearing the following words. The Villains League Open Membership now. Become a pro-villain or professional villain right now. Shigaraki-sama, you still printed out that banner. We both know it'll work out for the best, Kurogiri. When Shinso viewed the remaining words on the banner, he was at a loss for words. The Villain League advantages of membership level 8 plus advantages of membership. Weekly tax-free royalties, oddball instruction and enhancement, removal, bestowal of QUIRK's membership card and black links to the underworld, complete health coverage card to get out of jail, free level 5 plus advantages of membership. Monthly tax-free royalties, odd counseling and advice card of membership in red erasure of public records and cleaning admission test cheat sheets, level 3 plus advantages of membership. Quarterly tax-free royalties, odd problem assistance card of membership in white. I joined the V-League and all I got was this lousy t-shirt gear, unidentified cell after, echoed along the hallway in rounds. They're joking. Are these guys really villains? As if. No real villains would ever do something like this. Hey, wait, tell me more about those entrance exams cheat slips. Can you really remove people's quirks? Is that actually possible? There's no way it's possible. This whole thing is totally a scam. It was being taken lightly by all. Nobody was able to take it seriously. After sating himself with food and enjoying newfound joys, Shinso saw that nobody was posing the really difficult questions. Both Kurogiri and Shigaraki exuded an air of pure lethality, and nobody questioned that. Standing squarely in front of the man, no one had experienced the same unpleasant pressure that he had. Shigaraki gave off the impression that he wanted them to doubt him. But the white membership card, you'll be able to order around any local thugs and mobs you see to do minor things like scare someone off, help you with groceries, and the likes. With the red membership card, you can do the above plus order gangsters and hoodlums to attack or mug people you don't like, but nothing too extreme with the black membership card. You can have them do anything you want. Murder, arson, kidnapping, and there are also some other benefits. There's no way that's possible. I told you, he's messing with us. This whole thing is probably some really elaborate prank. I'll grant you all one white membership card to use as you wish for the next 24 hours. To increase your membership level, you'll have to complete certain missions and tasks for the league, all of which will be delivered via untraceable cells. Alternatively, recruiting more members will earn you more EXP, so you can level faster. And you gain more EXP every time your recruits go up in rank and recruit their own recruits finally, and most importantly, Kurogiri knows where every single one of you lives. Inform any pro-heroes or policemen of anything that happened here will only end with you being dumped on some abandoned island to slowly unravel your sanity and starve to death. That was the one that most people remembered. The one who started to imply that perhaps, just possibly, they weren't being played off. Alright, Shigaraki sighed. My stamina bar is depleted. Thank you all for coming, and I hope you all choose to enjoy being in the villains party. If you have any questions, find me online. Helping Hand Senpai is always there to lend a helping hand. Shigaraki clasped his hands one last time. Good night. Then, Shinso was unaware of it. He didn't think about it then, and he wouldn't think about it when he woke up in his room on his bed hours later, his memory of the entire bizarre night being a little hazy. It wouldn't occur to him to think about it again until he discovered a white aluminium card with the words LOV inscribed on top on his bedroom table. He would eventually come to understand that there was a villain out there who could open portals to what seemed like any place in the world. That dude knew his address, too. XY. What now, Kurogiri? He went ahead with that ridiculous plan, even after he said Sensei already has his own cult group. Why does he care if I make my own? My methods will work. And if they don't, I'll try another method. And another. We could have simply recruited normally. There's no point in recruiting mobs, Kurogiri. Mobs always get stomped by any halfway decent hero. The trick is to recruit potential heroes. Good guys falling to the darkness. Or innocent bystanders that are way in over their heads. That way, they're like essential NPCs. And heroes can't kill essential NPCs, no matter how much they want to. Play some videogames, Kurogiri. You'll learn something. How about this one, Ka-chan? The boy lifted the instrument. The female gave a head shake. No. He answered back. Maybe something smaller. Steps and a stinto. It was the first time she had heard such quiet movements. Unbelievable footsteps tumbling to the ground. She covered her face with a magazine behind the counter. 3 weeks ago, when the magazine was originally released, she had perused its contents. Her earlobes were digging into the floor, her eyes fixed on the gaps between syllables. Oh, Izuku-kun, I really don't know. It's been years since I picked up an instrument. Decades. Let's start with something small. This should do the trick. He pulled out another device. A harmonica. He gave it a wave. He held it out and said, it's small enough that you can use your quirk on it. You can also carry it around in your purse and play it wherever you go. People won't like that. Good music is liked by all. The child gestured with his finger. Even Kakin still plays the drums in his attic once in a while. The woman covered her lips, trying not to laugh. Does he know Mitsuki-chan was in a band back in the day? She responded. She dyed her hair and had piercings and everything. She would grab a microphone and scream really loudly into it. She was all about the heavy iron music. Ka-chan, I think it's called heavy metal. Metal, iron, they're the same thing aren't they? She cleared her throat, then stopped herself. She turned the magazine over, digging her ears deeper into the ground as she realized she had been looking at one page for too long. Steps and a stinto. Heartbeats to a metronome. Beneath her top teeth, her bottom lip folded. Her eyebrows furrowed. She looked again. She reiterated that. His heart was pumping blood at precisely the right rate. A solid enough beat to serve as the foundation for a freestyle rapper. The harmonica, you're getting one as well, aren't you? Ah, Izuku-kun. The woman exclaimed in a somewhat severe tone. I thought the idea was for us to spend more time together and have more common interests. It is. Then why aren't you getting an instrument? The boy gave his head a scratch. I'll get one. Just, not yet. When? After you've mastered that one. The woman was having irregular heartbeats. The boy's heart continued to beat regularly. Perfect. Rhythmic. Her right foot started tapping the floor against her will to follow the beat. I don't understand, Izuku-kun. The boy rubbed his head and said, Ka-chan. It's better if I showed you. His footsteps came to rest in a precise spot. Sit, she heard him say. She caught the sound of the first key he struck on the grand piano. The whole music store reverberated with the C5 chord. Suddenly, unexpectedly, more chords started to play. She knew it right away. Any music student would. Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata's opening movement drifted through the music store in a gloomy, melancholy mood. Her magazine fell from her face as each note struck a chord with such accuracy that her eyes focused entirely on the boy playing the piano for the first time. The ponytail pulled back on the green hair. Sleek, attractive features on a lean, muscular frame. His physique was flawless. His fingers danced slowly on top of the keyboard, gaining speed and momentum with an unsettling posture. Other shoppers in the store had stopped what they were doing to gawk. Her father also halted in his tracks, holding fresh drumstick boxes. Time stood motionless during the first movement's solemnity. Later on, she would swear she saw the notes dancing in the air. That the music had faded into the background, turning reality like an old-fashioned movie, and that her life had frozen, transformed into black and white. He moved fluidly into the third movement right away. Time flew by. Colors exploded back into the actual world. His fingers flew across the piano, hitting keys with more elegance and speed than should have been humanly possible as notes whirled and swirled violently in the air. The pace quickened. Her heart pounded. A fresh light swirled in her eyes. Her body resisted the opposing impulses to stand up and dance and to remain motionless and in awe. There was music being played, reaching both inside and outside of reality. Behind him, the woman with green hair was staring as fixatedly as the others. Her eyes glistened with wide-open surprise as the shop took on a new dimension with the sound of exquisite music. The virtuoso concluded his performance almost as abruptly as he had started, lowering the tempo as the song reached its climax and ending slowly, something she found herself dreading. It felt as though a spell had been broken once the last chord was played. Abruptly, there was absolute silence. Then thunderous applause. Numerous others approached the child, wishing him well and anxious to shake his hand. Among them was her father, who clapped his hands more forcefully than she'd heard in a long time and let out a loud, huge laugh. That was brilliant. Amazing. Marvelous. I was moved to tears. She was itching to move too. She was interested in getting to know the boy who appeared to be her age but had exceptional piano skills. A musician whose rhythm was a constant in his heartbeat. Oh, it's nothing really. He dismissed the compliment with a laugh that made her chest burn with mixed feelings. That was not insignificant. There was a part of her that wanted to give him a hard headshake for saying that. The other was so taken aback by the humility that he wondered how someone could be able to laugh so beautifully. She hid behind her book again, glancing across to look at the boy's face. The gorgeous boy. When she realized where her thoughts had disappeared, her face burned. The more she sat there, peering over, the more her heart pounded in an erratic pace. Daughter, your age. She'd love to meet you. Not at all. Her heartbeat accelerated multiple times. Oh Tucson, you're stupid. I don't Yuka-chan. Not the moniker. Hey, Tucson. With a calm breathing and heartbeat, she waved to her father who was waving at her and smiling, signaling for her to come closer. She approached the mother and boy with green hair while maintaining a steady heartbeat. As her father gave her a back pat and let out loud, excited yells, she managed to maintain a steady heartbeat. "This is my daughter, Kyoka. She's a fantastic musician herself. Kyoka-chan, Midoriya-kun here is your age. Can you believe it?" With his dazzling green hair, asymmetric freckles, bright teeth and infectious smile, the child held out his hand to embrace her. "I'm Midoriya Izuku." Her heart began to beat rapidly. She grasped his hand. "I'm Kyoka. Jiro Kyoka." With a smile, the youngster touched the back of her hand with his thumb. With a marveling expression, his piercing green eyes fell on her earlobes. "Pleasure to meet you, Kyoka-san. You have really beautiful ears." Her pulse was rapid and strong. She could only hear the ba-dum, overpowering all other sounds. She stammered, yanking her hand away from his as fast as she could. Thank you." Through the corner of her eye, she caught a glimpse of her father's cheeky yet sly glance at her. "You dare not, Mrs. Midoriya, I noticed you have a harmonica on you. We have the diatonic, tremolo and orchestral types available. We also have them in different color schemes and sizes. If you'll follow me. Oh, please don't. Oh, forgive me, I'm not too knowledgeable on instruments. Izuku-kun is the one who's helping me pick an instrument." She appeared confused. Her son smiled up at her. He looked at her father and said, "Ka-chan, how about you pick one with your favorite color? Do you have any with a nice green tint?" "Certainly. Right this way." She sighed with relief as the youngster went with them and she with them. During their time at the business, the boy remained by his mother's side, fortunately foiling all of her father's intentions in one way or another. She made an attempt to elicit some inquiries, but she was either unable to do so quickly enough or was unable to do so at all. She was unnerved by the boy's attractiveness. Though she didn't think she was ugly, in the brief time she was with him, she started to rethink that opinion. He possessed the kind of beauty she thought could only be attained via the lens of a camera, with the help of copious quantities of cosmetics and passionate digital editing. She appeared uninteresting as she stood next to him as they passed a mirror. Unremarkable and uninspired. She became extremely aware of everything she said and did. She was either fumbling over her words or silently mumbling them. The fact that she liked the sound of his heartbeat didn't help either. His footsteps were very quiet, which made it difficult for her to avoid running into him by accident because she relied more on her hearing than her vision for navigation. She sputtered, "Sorry." The boy gave her a smile. "It's fine." Her peculiar awkwardness only served to increase her self-consciousness to the extent that she was unable to find herself in conversation, to even bring up the one subject she was positive they would discuss music and actually pronounce the words. She gasped, "You have really quiet footsteps." His brows were tipped back and he laughed heartily. "Do I? They're almost inaudible." "All the better." She was unable to ask him to elaborate and he declined. Instead, he made his way into the bookstore, keeping his eyes fixed on the green-haired woman. "Worried about your mum?" He smiled strangely at her. "A little. My dad's great at this stuff. He'll find her the right instrument. That isn't what worries me." Her arms were crossed. Her mother and father were merrily chattering away. The subject of conversation had somehow veered from instruments to kids and parenting strategies. She cleared her throat. "So. Where did you learn how to play so well?" His peculiar smile got even stranger. "At a music store." She uncrossed her arms and said, "Really? Must have been some music store. Is it somewhere around here?" Not too far actually. Have I heard of it?" He answered, "You probably have. Probably know it like the back of your hand." He was being really evasive. "And how would you know that?" "Just a feeling." He shrugged his shoulders. "An educated guess." For the first time, she realized he had not given her a glance during their chat. He was staring at the green-haired woman most of the time. It was impossible to read his face. "Something wrong?" "I don't know yet." She gave a head tilt. "You don't?" "Today," he said, clicking his fingers as he ran his fingers over his hair. "Today is supposed to be about her birthday?" She asked clumsily. "We had a fight a while back. I said some things in anger. Some things I can't take back. I'm trying to correct that. Find common interests between us. Or make them." But he paused. "But." He sighed softly, "I wonder if I'm just forcing things my way again." He whispered something under his breath that only she could hear. "I've been doing a lot of that lately." Her lips went thin. She cleared her voice and proceeded to lightly tap the boy's shoulder. Before she could touch him, he swerved out of the way. She lost her equilibrium due to the suddenness of it all, but then a hand jerked out and grabbed hers. "Hold her steady for a time. Are you okay?" His countenance was near. "Very, very, very near." "Why, you have great reflexes." His mouth pursed. "I have to. I'm training to be a pro hero." "Really?" She blurted out, then realized that she had spoken too enthusiastically. I mean I'm applying to UA. To become a hero also. He smiled broadly at her and said, that's great. Yes, I am. He exclaimed. Well, Kakin and he's my friend, we're both going to take the exam this Saturday. So maybe we'll meet the venue. That would be nice. She was disarmed by another sparkling brighter smile. Best of luck, Jiro-san. With 2 harmonicas and 1 flute, the mother and son left. When her father realized she had not spoken to Midoriya, he was left to ask him to join his orchestra. Though he graciously declined, he did take her father's card. Thanks for visiting rock and music stores. Hope to see you again. He gave a hearty cheer and waved. She released an uncomfortable breath that she was unaware she was holding while she stood there. Her father turned to face her, a bothersome sneer on his face. She bit out, what? My baby Yoka-chan has her first crush. Her cheeks were scorched. I do not. He gave his ears a tap. Your old man has good hearing too. Your heart was fortissimo as soon as the boy complimented your ears. Even more heat burned in her face. She avoided giving him a look by crossing her arms. You heard it too, didn't you? His heart. Her father remarked, steady. He said, beautiful. The literal heart of a musician. He placed his hand on her hair and fluffed it out. I don't blame you. I could sit next to him and listen to that rhythm for days on. He's a rare gem, that Midoriya. His musical talent is 1 in a million, no, maybe 1 in a billion. I don't think even I could have played that song as beautifully as he did. Her dad gave her a thumbs up. Your two-san approves of your taste. You have my blessing. She smacked his hand away, saying, be bless. Stop saying such embarrassing stuff two-san. Geez. Knowing in the end that it was just her father's direct style of handling things, she chose to ignore his constant cruel taunting. In many respects, musicians were much simpler than other people. In the Jiro family, for example, where everyone loved music as much as they loved one another, liking someone really only required that the other person share their passion for music. Although her knowledge of Midoriya Izuku was limited, she could tell from the way he played. Music possessed the ability to convey emotions from the spirit that words or deeds alone were unable to express. It conveyed the message with passion and broke down barriers of age, gender, and language. Midoriya Izuku has a firm, steady heartbeat and exquisite melody. She therefore questioned why, recalling his face as he struck the piano while playing the Moonlight Sonata, she remembered the first notes and tone of his performance. Why does his music have such a angry? UA High School principal's office. The tea was prepared just the way he liked it. To balance the flavor, there's a tiny touch of sweetness, a tinge of bitterness, and some spice. The tiniest honey drops around the mug's borders added just the right amount of sweetness and saltiness, making it much more enjoyable to sip with his accompanying cigarette. The time was drawing near for the next group of exceptional pupils and bright brains to enroll in the school that would transform them into heroes for the community. The perfect defenders of justice. Or, anyway, that was the promoted picture that the public needed to hear. Much more polite than acknowledging that they were essentially preparing kids to fight as frontline troops in an unending conflict with the government's adversaries. He took a small sip of his tea, opened his paws, put his cigarette in the ashtray, and looked back at his computer. My, so many promising children this year. So many. He already knew, of course, who would get in and who wouldn't. He was already aware of the classes they would attend. What relationships they might form. The connections and friendships that would develop as a result of the information he gathered from their academic transcripts and other personal sources. He'd already made decisions about their class schedules, lunch schedules, and seating assignments. He'd already figured out how they'd pass their leisure time, personal time, and off hours. He was aware of how their immature minds, bursting with teenage hormones and overconfidence, would create responses that accompanied romantic or sexualized feelings for one another. He could already see the pupils' heart-wrenching tragedies, comedy, and fears as they did a circus-style balancing act while trying to balance being a teenager with wanting to be a famous soldier. The principal took a sip of his tea and tasted the honey slowly from the mug's side. Oh, it should be just about time. He smiled at his phone as he turned to face it. He held off for 10 seconds. Another 5 seconds. His eyebrows furrowed a little in frustration. The phone rang 2 seconds later. Hello. Principal Nezu. 2 seconds earlier, I've been expecting your call, Toshinori-kun. You have met and explained the situation to Mirio-kun. Nothing ever slips by you, does it? He hummed softly and quietly. How did he take it? He seems determined. Strong. I believe he'll make an excellent symbol of peace. And have you made up with Sasaki-kun yet? He didn't. I have to go, Principal. There's a sludge villain at large, Nezu murmured. Go on then. Be safe, Toshinori-kun. There was a quiet click to stop the call. Once more, Nezu hummed and reached for his tea. Sometimes humans were just so predictably irrational. Another example of a failed hero-sidekick connection between Toshinori and Sasaki was their mutual intransigence, making it impossible for them to work things out. Nezu was unaffected. There was no pressing need to mend their broken relationship at the moment. He would never stop allowing people to be people. "I'm a sludge villain," he says. Before Toshinori arrived, the sludge villain would have already been vanquished. He wondered how Toshinori-kun would react when he saw the strange couple who were behind it. One more set of connected incidents. The city's main players were showing up in full force. With their pieces on the board and their strength gathered, they were all making their moves and intentions. Nezu was sufficiently familiar with almost every player. All save one. That one, the most enigmatic and dangerous guy of them all. Every move he made, every action he took, fractured the board and sent Nezu's ideas and forecasts flying in radically new ways. If only his calculations could take that individual into consideration, he attempted to close his eyes and focus once again. He recoiled in response to the excruciating headache. The agony was so intense and piercing that he had to support his head. Well, that was unpleasant. Nezu let out a sigh. He detested that guy deeply. To have endowed oneself with a quirk that rendered him impervious to precognitive powers. It was really annoying. Now on to more trivial affairs, he said, consulting his watch. Perhaps this thing is running slow again. His phone rang while he was saying this. "Hello?" he said, "Good day, Intelli-san," with a smile. "I've been expecting your call. You have a date." Midoriya swallowed the water bottle, his head nodding. With a sigh of relief, he let the remaining fluids cascade down his face. "She's very smart. I'm more surprised that she's fucking real. Thanks for believing in me, Kaken." Kaken gave a snort. He scowled at the rising sun and shook his head. "Huh. You're right. Never believed you had it in you. What's that supposed to mean? Figured you'd grow old surrounded by dozens of girls who wanted to bone you, but never take 'em up on their offer, cause you'd be too dense to realize what they're offering." He threw the water bottle, saying, "Psycho and I aren't going to bone," and Kitsuki caught it without turning to see. "We're simply going to have lunch together." Midoriya scowled. "Wait, there are girls who want to with me? See? That's that fucking denseness I'm talking about. Kaken, how the hell is it that you can pick out the bloody legs of an ant inside a bowl of murky soup but can't even realize when a group of bimbos have the hots for you?" Midoriya cleared her throat. "A group of? You're not talking about the girls in class, are you? Kaken, I've told you, they just needed my help and that was it." "Yeah, they needed your help alright. I thought you didn't pay attention to these type of things or care about them." Kaken's eye to the right quivered. "Do I look like I'm a fucking eunuch? You never seemed to care about girls. There hasn't been anyone fucking worth caring about thus far." Ah. As the sun rose higher in the sky, their morning run came to an end due to the heat and brightness. Maintaining physical fitness was an essential habit for individuals who aspired to be heroic or not. They have to be tough, competent, and firm. To put an end to wickedness and villainy, they needed to be able to sprint into danger and come in at a moment's notice. Izuku had initially agreed to the morning runs, which had been suggested by Kaken. They began with 1-kilometer sprints during the first week of training, completing a full 1-kilometer run every day for 7 days until they gained the rhythm and increased their endurance to complete the assignment without difficulty. In the second week, they increased that figure to 2 kilometers. In the third, 3. In the fourth, 4. He and Kaken had decided to begin running 10 kilometers every morning, including on weekends, before school starting the next week. Kaken's lack of energy had caused him to start dozing off in class more frequently, but Izuku wasn't too bothered by it and kept using class time for independent study. "So, this girl you're meeting, Psycho. Psycho. Whatever. What do you like about her? She's smart. Mentioned that. She's nice. Most people's default setting. Kaken, were you interested? Because it's you, Izuku. I wouldn't put it past you to pity date a girl you don't fucking like if you think it'll make her just a tiny bit fucking happier." Izuku parted his lips. It was intended that they would have spoken out in opposition. Presumably will. He closed his lips and blew into the chilly morning air, watching his breath appear before his face. It was something he could imagine himself doing, so he couldn't exactly deny it. "I already do that in theory," but he was unable to bring that up. That secret would stay that way for the time being. That was more knowledge than Kaken was ready to absorb. Most likely, he never would be. "Shit the fuck, Izuku, I mean in the long run it'll make her sadder if she realized I only dated her because I felt bad for her. But if she doesn't mind that I dated her out of pity, you're fucked up, Izuku. Is it wrong to want to make people happy? Even if that happiness is a fucking lie? As long as they never learn it's a lie, then isn't it fine?" "Fucked up." Izuku let out a sigh. For some reason, Kaken was still Kaken and would not give up on things like this. Remained fervently skeptical about the intrinsic evil and bad in the world. Izuku was merely pointing out that most people's default condition wasn't, not that there weren't nasty and evil people in the world. It was a fantastic thing to spread happiness around the planet. To make their kids happy and give them the impression that someone was bringing them gifts, parents used lies to their kids about Santa Claus. Pre-QUIRK churches and faiths propagated unverified stories about rewards for good deeds in a hereafter, and people believed them because they offered them the will and encouragement to go on living their lives, day by day. They continued and established organizations and charities in an effort to improve the world. What if they had done it expecting to be rewarded? They continued to act morally. Some folks were unable to comprehend. It didn't matter if you carried out a good deed for the wrong reasons, doing good was sufficient in and of itself. What if some individuals recorded a video of themselves giving a homeless man assistance and used it to promote their kindness? The famished man didn't give a damn because he would have money and food, which was more than others who were criticizing the helpers could offer. Did your intentions really matter as long as you did the right thing? So, is that what you're doing to this psycho girl? No. You sure about that? Psycho and I have been in communication since our meeting a few months ago, Izuku remarked, taking a moment to collect himself. She kind of challenged me due to something with my quirk that she didn't think I was capable of doing, and we kinda non-verbally agreed to only meet after I'd done what it was she thought I couldn't do. Kaken gave a snort. Sounds like a bitch. Midoriya gave a clumsy laugh. Well, she's not all bad. She's just a bit too smart for her own good. I don't understand some of the stuff she talks about sometimes. She's kind of the type of person you'd need to do an internet search just to be able to follow her in conversation. She enjoys tea a lot. She likes pre-QUIRK era fiction, Western philosophy, science fiction books. She loves astrophysics. She's written a book on it. Kaken gazed. She's in high school and has a fucking book on astrophysics. She graduated when she was 9. Kaken's expression furrowed. Izuku shrugged and let out an uncomfortable laugh. I told you she was smart. Huh. How'd you say you two meet again? Mitsuda-san introduced us. You met at your otaku club? Yeah. Kaken said, huh. You can meet girls at nerd gatherings now. What the hell is the world turning into? Izuku's mouth twitched. Kaken, are you actually interested in girls? As opposed to fucking what, being interested in starfish? Izuku let out an indiscernible snort. So what kind of girl are you looking for? I'm not looking, Kaken declared. I'll know when I find her. And that'll be that. What matters most is becoming the #1 hero. Getting a girlfriend is something any idiot can do. But not anyone can be #1. I dunno, Kaken. I think you might scare off girls with your explosions. Kaken snorted. Better for me. If she can't handle a few explosions, what good is she? I need a partner, not a burden. Alright, Izuku considered. You'd also better not let some lovey-dovey shit get your eyes off the prize, Izuku. I'll fucking kill you if you end up failing the entrance exam because your head was in the clouds over some girl. Kaken, calm down, Izuku said. There's nothing in this world that's going to distract me from doing what it is that I set out to do. Particularly at this moment, since he was starting the initial part of his plans. At this point, when everything was gradually beginning to line up and his objectives would get closer to reality. Of course, the task would not be easy and he would undoubtedly make many enemies, but Izuku was willing to make that sacrifice. You said she challenged you to do something with your quirk. Kaken responded. What's that all about? Oh, well, basically she wanted me to solve this really complicated science problem regarding the quirk factor. Essentially finding and isolating the quirk gene from neural connections and cerebral pathways and identifying the core activation mechanism and organisms which enable the usage of quirks, along with exploring the limitations and why those limitations are in place. It's really quite interesting. Right, Kaken said, his gaze darting all over. Interesting. So, Kaken, the way I was able to solve this problem was that there was a loud, soaring smash in the street in front of them. Kaken was grinning uncontrollably, and Izuku couldn't help but notice the almost thankful look on his face. He had never really lied to Kaken about what he did, or to anybody else for that matter, regarding some of his more dubious actions. He was lucky enough that they never showed any interest in finding out how Midoriya Izuku dissected the complex medication trigger and refined it into a serum that could greatly enhance peculiarities without having any negative side effects like hyperaggression or mental instability. Let's check out what that was. We might make it late for class if we do that. We'll be taking and acing the entrance exam soon anyway. You really still give a shit about classes that aren't doing anything for us? Izuku parted his lips, but Kaken arrived first and dashed across the road. Last one there is second place trash. Damn it, Kaken. Move. 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 Yasuhide was aware of his hazards. Please move out of my way. Despite his inner agony, he continued to smash civilians aside while making his escape. His form was never designed for speed, and the number of people he had to yell at to get out of his way would determine the fastest he could go on a school day in a congested street. The alerts had already started to sound, and he was aware that all it would take was one well-meaning onlooker to destroy his day. Oh no, look at them depart. Villain. It was always the same wail. A busybody would shout, there's a villain on the loose. Another would exclaim, somebody call the pro-heroes. They were right for the first time, he was acting in a villainous manner. In other cases, even when they weren't, they would just assume and let out the cry right away. They wouldn't last a day, fucking bastards. The onlookers undoubtedly mused, there goes a revolting-looking sludge man. He has to be a villain, Yasui snorted. Stupid people. All of them were liars. Did they really assume he was just a bunch of green guck? That he wouldn't if he had the option to be someone else naturally? The answer is no. He wasn't a bloodsucker. It would be the ultimate absurdity for anyone to wish to spend their life as a formless gelatinous blob monster. Halt there, villain. Oh no, Yasui detested them. He detested heroes. He was not a hero, heroes were. Not only were they born with more eccentricities, but they also had the public's admiration and backing, which was far worse. Some conceited fools who believed they were superior to everyone else because they were fortunate enough to have amazing idiosyncrasies. Damn you, bastard. Move aside, please. Yasui was indifferent to where the bastard had landed. A horrible crunch from the landing caused him to feel both vindicated and terrified at the same time. Manhole, the nearest manhole, darn it. Come on, Yasui looked about, racing through the streets in an attempt to find a way out. Stealing a bank during the day in a city full of superheroes was a suicidal act. The frighteningly proficient and the incredibly stupid were the two types of villains who committed large-scale crimes throughout the day. Yasui didn't possess either. He belonged to an uncommon third category. The extremely desperate. The only kind of decent, honest work that somebody born as an ugly gelatinous creature could pursue was what he'd been doing. The world was big, full of diverse people with a wide range of preferences, and many of them, it turned out, harbored this bizarre, unfathomable vision of being utterly mesmerized by living gelatin. Yasui didn't know what the fetish was about, but he didn't need to know in order to profit. Frequently, his other performers were not as enthusiastic as he was about getting down to business. When the director revealed the fetish they would be catering to, Yasui didn't take it personally when they puked after the tape was finished, nor did he take personally the looks of disdain and revulsion they would direct at him. Of course, there were those who had been excited at first, but as soon as the camera began to roll and Yasui performed as he was supposed to, all of them instantly lost their excitement. A fantasy was supposed to be just that, aphrodisiac secreting magic crap, that's why Yasui didn't have any of it to make the whole thing better. Yasui felt his life would have been much easier if he had been a fantasy slime, but he wasn't that fortunate. Yasui found himself out of a job when someone else who had the same luck showed up. He made every other effort. He attempted to put out a fire, but was unsuccessful because a young child was too afraid to leap into his arms and preferred to remain inside a burning building. He attempted building work, but lacked the skills required to complete it. He even descended to the level of managing sewage, and even that was better left to some bitch whose quirk could make something like black holes. His apartment's landlady was already having a hard time with his residing there. The owners had turned down his applications for tenancy in several locations because they didn't want others to know that a monster resided nearby. Should he fail to pay his rent, even for a single instance, he would be left penniless and without any possessions. Yasui didn't rob the bank that afternoon for any of the reasons mentioned above. Even with everything going against him, he wasn't just motivated by self-preservation when he decided to risk everything. Surround him. Extra heroes. At first glance, he failed to identify any of them. Cannon fodder, if I could only get away, please, get away from these people before anybody truly deadly showed up, then there was a chance he would survive. He said again, I can make it. I'm able to arrive on time. The heroes were racing to get the people out of the way and clear the passage. Yasui perceived it as a chance. He looked around. The students were awake and moving around. He fixed his gaze on two lads who appeared to be in middle school and were standing far away. Yasui didn't think it was a good idea to hire someone who would struggle because the blonde had menacing eyes. The person positioned next to him, Yasui, a gorgeous boy, was pissed off. He felt jealous. The child with green hair had a face that would have looked great in glossy magazines and pricey catalogs. That kind of person has probably never experienced pain in their lives. That kind of person could never connect with him. A sharp bitter laugh leaked out of him. What kind of life would I have if I was that beautiful from birth? Yasui lunged at the boy, a resentment bubbling beneath the surface. As he edged closer to his goal, his gelatinous shape swung and flowed past the pro-hero's attempts to stop him. With all his professional knowledge, he'd learned how to take control of people's bodies, and for that, at least, he was grateful. The lad was attractive, and attractive individuals typically had nice eccentricities, and Kami was a petty, unjust and unkind person. Oi. He was halted in his tracks by a single word. He had been ignoring the fair-haired boy standing next to his intended victim. A child, blonde, with a menacing gaze. For the first time in a long time, Yasui remembered what fear was supposed to feel like as the children's scarlet eyes pierced his form so intensely. "Kaken," said the attractive boy. "Smash and grab. TCH. There are pro-heroes are here. Quirk restriction law allows for exceptions under duress, in self-defense, or in defense of another." Yasui was not a guy of religion. Still, he could have thought he saw the devil in that instant as he looked into the crimson eyes and menacing smile of the blonde youngster. "Now we're talking." Yasui was too busy to wonder about it. He was shaken by an explosion that split the earth, sending his liquid form skyward and the shockwaves scattering. In an effort to reform as soon as possible, his consciousness alternated between individual molecules. The attractive boy, however, was moving. It appeared that he held something in his hands. A receptacle. Yasui was perplexed. How is he utilizing a? Yasui would have cursed the Kami if he had really been gazing over humanity from above. Right before the final remnant of his liquid form was sealed away into a schoolchild's water bottle, Yasui would have cursed his life, his luck, and his fate. How come I just saw this? Let me out of here. Let me out. Let me out. Like most of the shell-shocked heroes and bystanders, Shinji Nishiya or Kamui Woods, the pro-hero, could only stand and gaze. The raging monster that they had been unable to halt let out a loud cry from inside an enamel flask that was being clutched by a person who looked like a middle school student. The two guys stood carelessly, as though they were incapable of realizing the gravity of what they had done. Maybe they didn't fail, rather, they just didn't give a damn about how they captured and rendered a villain helpless. TCH. You were slower than usual on your right swing. You're joking, Kaken. I know what I saw. Would you hesitate? Pause. Kamui Woods was unable to comprehend. His own eyes had followed, almost able to keep up, as the boy with the green hair sprang and caught every piece of the blast-damaged muck in a move so graceful it could have competed with ballet. He was hardly able to make it out even as a pro-hero, but for some reason, his friend was able to see everything and even identify these tiny mistakes. Death Arms muttered, "Hey Kamui. Who are these kids?" When the duo's show wore off, the audience started asking the same questions in a more animated fashion. "That was amazing. Whoa. They totally took out that villain like it was nothing. I got it on my phone, look. With a weary groan, Shinji scratched the back of his head. "I don't know, but I have a feeling we're going to be finding out soon." He continued to stare at the boy with the green hair. He was the more approachable of the two, by default. Although Kamui attempted to avoid making snap judgments about individuals based only on their appearance, it was undeniable that the lad with green hair, who was standing next to her, appeared to be a more courteous person. The moment the boy got close, recognition flared in his eyes. "Ah, pro-hero Kamui Wood-san." He gave a semi-formal bow with his head tilted. "Are we in trouble?" "And he's really courteous," Shinji observed. The boy's eyes were devoid of any regret or worry as he said, "No, not at all. Normally, interfering with the capture of a villain would be considered an act of vigilantism. It was quite unsettling. But as the villain in question clearly attacked you with malicious intent, you were within your rights to defend yourself." Death Arms whistled, and that was some mighty fine defense. "Damn, you kids are good. You looking for work? You could come work with my agency." Shinji furrowed his brow. "Death Arms, they're clearly still junior high students. We're applying to UA." The boy with green hair announced, a big smile on his face. "So, maybe when we get our provisional licenses. What do you think, Kaken?" The boy with blonde hair gave the two men a quick glance before snorting. "I don't work for losers." Kaken with a giggle, Death Arms folded his arms. "Pretty sharp mouth you got on ya, don't you kid? Forgive Kaken, he gets grumpy when he hasn't eaten breakfast." "Oi." The boy with green hair bent slightly. "I'm Midoriya Izuku. This is my best friend, Kitsuki Bakugo." Shinji etched the names into his mind. "A pleasure to meet you, Midoriya-san. If I may ask, what quirk do you have?" "Ah, well, that's why, Izuku." The fair-haired woman cut in. "Hand them the villain and let's get going. We've got to get to school, remember?" "Come on, Kaken, they're pro-heroes." The child, Kitsuki, sneered, "Pro-heroes that needed us to do their jobs for them. I could probably take them on and win." "You could probably take both of them on at the same time and win." Shinji felt compelled to correct the record and interject. But his pride recognized that he was not able to. First of all, there was no use disputing with a junior high school student about something as trivial as beating them up, and second, the boy's opinion that he was required to apprehend the villain wasn't entirely incorrect. Both Shinji's peculiarity and Death Arms and Backdraft were unfit for such an adversary. In other words, the best they could have done on their own was to monitor the bad guy and prevent him from hurting innocent people while they waited for a better person to come along and take it out. Naturally, this was a very significant heroic work. For a pro hero, minimizing casualties and holding down the fort was just as important as doing their job. But just like in athletics, you never really got noticed for having the most assists, being the man with the most goals was always what garnered the most attention. Death Arms chastised, there's a lot more to hero work than just catching the bad guys. You got some real chops on you, kid, but you're not going to get far with that attitude. Not unless you're aiming to be an Endeavor clone. Who the hell would want to be a copy of the guy forever stuck in second place? At that, Shinji winced. Midoriya, the boy with green hair, simply shook his head, displaying a look that made it evident he was accustomed to his friend's somewhat harsh demeanor. After clearing his mouth, the boy gave the flask containing the sludge villain a courteous bow. It was a pleasure meeting you, Kamui Wood-san, Death Arm-san, but we really need to get to school before we're late. The blonde boy turned around and said, TSK. After clicking his tongue. Heroes don't fucking lose. The Midoriya boy was hurrying away for the sake of his pals, Shinji could tell. Or that was the sense he was given, anyway. The two youngsters also didn't last very long before they were surrounded by onlookers who congratulated them and asked them questions. The pro hero felt as though he knew exactly what would air tonight at 7 o'clock on the news. Death Arms laughed, heh, the UA festival is gonna be exciting this year. You think they'll make the cut? You think they won't? Shinji gave a shrug. Not many people can't say that they've stopped a villain even before they entered a hero academy. It doesn't exactly mean they're hero material. Well, at least, not both of them. Now the blonde kid may be a bit rough around the edges. Shinji cut him off, saying, no, not him. The other one. You're kidding, right? He found it funny, Shinji remarked. The expression on his face when he asked whether or not he was in trouble. He looks and feels like a generally good kid, but Shinji was unable to get rid of it. Usually, he'd expected a response when he'd brought up the possibility that what they'd done could be seen as vigilantism. Rather, nothing had been present. No, something had existed and that something was the absence of anything. Prospective candidates for a hero academy understood the consequences of having a vigilantism charge against them, but yet. Izuku Midoriya had laughed. Anyway, Shinji stated, gesturing to the flask that held the sludge villain. Shinji felt the flask and said, we might as well hand this guy over to the. He gave it a quick shake, once, twice, and sure enough, something was within, but the sounds were vanished. He was tempted to open it to make sure it was the appropriate flask, but he knew that if he did and it was, he would only be releasing the antagonist. Neither now nor here was there any reason to take a chance on that. Something wrong, Kamui? No, nothing. I remembered the name, Midoriya Izuku. What a fascinating young man. A specific remark do you have to antagonize everyone you meet, Kaken? Kaken pointed directly at Izuku and said, they sucked, Izuku. They sucked and you know it. Say it wasn't us that sludge creep aimed for. He'd have grabbed some poor bastard while the heroes were twiddling their thumbs. Izuku murmured, there wasn't much they could do. Their quirks weren't equipped for the situation. Stulshit, laughed Kaken. That's the problem. They were just thinking about their quirks. Do you know how much shit they could have done if they thought about solving shit without using their quirks? Woodface can't trap him with his vines, sure, but what the fuck is stopping him from busting the fire hydrant and hosing down the sludge to slow him down? You mean other than the repair fees and collateral damage fines? Kaken held his mouth shut. You're shitting me. Kaken, pro heroes have to keep damages to the minimum because it gets taken out of their paychecks and gives a bad reputation for their agency. So, what, your rep is more important than catching the bad guys? Izuku smiled like a sheep. Sorta. He gave a shrug. You've got to remember that being a pro hero is also a business, Kaken. You're a celebrity and an authority figure and a first responder and well at times you've got to pick your priority. That's fucked. Izuku did not object. There was a displeased but not uncomfortable silence for the remainder of the walk to Eldera Junior High. It let Izuku time to reflect. He had been thinking like that a lot. There were moments when he questioned if he really had the conviction necessary to pursue his objectives, but he quickly overcame these doubts by reminding himself of the original reason for his actions. Of course, his biggest issue going forward would be funding. He didn't have a bank account and wasn't nearly able to get one without his parents' help. When the money started rolling in, whatever was placed into the account would undoubtedly become the center of attention. That's why he required her, then. The one who killed. Oi Izuku, look alive. The path they usually took was closed. Not by building, not by an unchangeable barrier, but rather by a group of around 4 ill-groomed hooligans. One looked like a rooster with his red hair fashioned into a mohawk. Out of the 4 members of the gang, he was the only one without a mutant-type physiology, like an elongated tongue or long ape-like arms. One of the men on the left asked, he's the one, ain't he, boss? Green hair, pretty face. Yeah, he's definitely the one. The man with red hair, the rooster man, remarked, I can see that you idiot. He sneered and turned to look at Izuku. Hey, kid. Don't make this rough on yourself. We've got instructions not to hurt you, so if you just come along quietly, this'll all go easier. The rooster man raised his hands and said, wait. Do either of you have a card before we get started? Izuku glanced over at Kaken. Kaken's brows furrowed with a mixture of displeasure and annoyance. The fuck are you talking about? Even if all you've got is a white membership card, you can flash it and we'll be on our way. They made it clear that all kids with cards are off limits, even for other kids with cards. Izuku's mind began to function. He tried to find any link, any memory from the last few weeks that had anything to do with memberships or cards. It seemed that only a few children behaving strangely flighty, shifty and suspicious came to him, along with the one occasion when a lad from his school had dropped a peculiar white plastic card with the letters LOV on top. Although he lacked sufficient information to make a precise estimation, he believed he could obtain his answers in another method. Just so you know, Izuku said, under Section 4, Subsection 5b of the QUIRK restriction law, it is not punishable to utilize one's quirk when it applies to the defense of another, alter ego defense of others, or defense of a third person. We have the right to use reasonable force, including in certain circumstances the use of deadly force. The Mohawk man said, cute. And am I supposed to be scared? Izuku held up a hand. My friend here has a quirk capable of generating explosions. His maximum explosive yield is in the kiloton range. To put this into perspective, one of the famed nuclear bombs from the pre-QUIRK era had a yield of just about 15 kilotons or 63 terajoules. While my friend certainly isn't currently capable of outputting that yield, he is, however, capable of generating an explosion on a much smaller scale that will still surely vaporize your flesh and liquidize your organs. Everyone fell silent. Kaken was remarkably silent as well. Izuku stepped forward, his smile never faltering. Should he be forced to engage in combat in the defense of another, that is, myself, it is highly likely that we can kill all four of you and get away with it in the court of law, while spinning the narrative for us to be known as brave heroes and your names and family names. Forever known as villains who sought to harm schoolchildren. All the men retreated as he advanced one more step. That said, your mother, father, brothers and sisters will be harassed, shamed, thrown out of stores, and rejected life-changing opportunities for being the dead relatives of evil villains. If you have no value for your own life, please consider theirs. Don't be the reason your parents hang themselves from a tree out of shame. The faces of the three men at the rear were getting paler. Midoriya could practically feel her heartbeat pounding. He could discern the minuscule micro-expressions of uncertainty and anxiety, as well as the sweat forming on their faces. The Mohawk man was the only one who was still having trouble making decisions, and Midoriya determined that this was due to a circumstance involving a stick and a carrot. Boss, I think we should think about this. The man with the mohawk told his friend, shut up damn it. His eyes straight to Kaken, who, obligingly, began to create loud frenzied explosions in his hands. The rooster man cursed and said, F fuck. Listen, I don't want to do this either, but the hand and the void, you can't go against them. They made the decision. We have to do whatever the brats with the cards order us to do, or we'll disappear, the long-armed guy said. Like Aruta-san and Nai-san. Izuku's thoughts were racing 1,000 miles per hour. The hand and the void. The rooster man bit his lip and said, the league, man. They look, all I know is, a girl had a black membership card, so we gotta obey them. If we don't, it ends bad. Every thug on the street, every criminal in this city that isn't affiliated with the 8 or the MLA is automatically a puppet for the hand. And the hand gave out cards to a large group of kids, so we gotta do whatever those kids want us to do depending on the card they got. You're saying someone told you to kidnap me? The long-armed thug remarked, the girl, she wore your uniform. She said you'd be jogging down this road, said she didn't want you hurt or nothing, but just wanted us to tie you up and bring you to him, and the man was unable to utter a single word. Izuku was at a loss for words as the bandit vanished out of nowhere. His disappearance was accompanied by no sound. Not a sound, not movement, not expectancy. The dude was there 1 minute and then he just vanished the next. That's how it worked. Oh fuck. The void. The void. Fuck. No, please. Wait, I didn't say anything. They were gone. One by one, until it seemed as if they had never been there in the first place. There was nothing to block their way and a strange quietness descended. What the fuck just happened? Izuku came upon a fresh query for which he was unprepared. Despite being among the most promising students at Aldera Junior High and it being one of the last days of classes, neither of them faced any consequences for arriving to class more later than usual. After experiencing a fascinating and slightly scary event, both lads turned to their thoughts because so much had happened in one morning. Izuku-kun, are you alright? "Izuku-kun, you look a bit tired. Can I help you with a massage?" When they got seated for class, Katsuki Bakugo could hardly contain his annoyance at how many sultry female classmates crowded around Izuku's seat. "Ah, it's nothing, I'm fine, thank you." His jaded mind calmed as he recalled the sight that had unfolded in front of them. But those thugs in front of him, Izuku almost seemed to change totally. With just a few comments that were, for the most part, entirely true, Izuku totally destroyed Katsuki's need for a battle, although Katsuki had been preparing to pick up a fight. Katsuki was aware that his detonations could be fatal. He wasn't a moron. Most humans weren't like him, though, and his body had developed an absurd resistance and strength to ensure he could endure the backlash of his own explosions without blowing his limbs off. The non-lethal setting was absent from Katsuki's explosions. His ability to regulate his explosions until the harm they caused was limited to the surface was his only hope of survival. But sometimes that was insufficient. He knew that he could murder people easily if he really let loose with his explosives. Of course he wouldn't, his goal was to become a hero, not a killer. Still, he was worried by the way Izuku had brought it up so nonchalantly and used it as fodder against the goons. He was startled by the cool way he discussed killing them and causing their families agony. He was disturbed since, of all people, this was Izuku. "Mr. Midoriya, Izuku is someone you just can't turn away when they need aid." It reminded me of watching Santa Claus take out a rifle and start robbing people on the streets. Yes, he had always wanted Izuku to develop some backbone, but this involved developing a backbone and then having a steel plate placed across it in order to attach a massive mechanical dorsal shark fin. Izuku didn't appear to be preoccupied with or motivated by being the greatest hero. His odd investigations and studies of everything from biology and anatomy to physics and engineering seemed to pique his attention more and more than that. For Katsuki, however, it was fortunate since he cruelly knew that nothing on earth could prevent Izuku from becoming the world's greatest hero. Not too long later, the lunch bell rang, and Katsuki rolled his eyes as a group of females nearly dragged Izuku along with them, each bringing a prepared lunch that they would feed him. The fool was able to look criminals and thugs in the eyes and threaten them with death without breaking a sweat, but he was unable to turn down a group of lustful puppy-eyed bimbos. TCH. Katsuki was indifferent. He needed answers to several queries. "Let me start by asking you what those men had been talking about the cards. In what way had they disappeared? Was there someone with a peculiar ability who could make people just vanish? In that exact same way? How did you counter that? In what way do you counter that?" He realized the answer was training. Just need to put in more effort in the gym. He would not give up. More difficult. Harder than before and again. There were 2 days for the UA entrance exams. If he didn't land the top slot, he'd be damned. The remainder of the school day flew by in an uninteresting haze. Katsuki occasionally even had trouble recalling the names and personal information of his own professors. He would still receive some of the best grades. Annoyingly, he'd long ago realized that Izuku's quirk was nothing more than a complete cheat system, so he took Izuku out of the picture because no one could match that cheat quirk, making Katsuki the top student theoretically. He was content to make every turn and tumble despite the amount of mental acrobatics involved. But at the end of the day, he was unable to locate the boy. More accurately, he had witnessed the youngster being hauled off somewhere by a girl and the two of them had vanished together. "Izuku, you'd better not be fucking doing what I think you're doing." No, he was analyzing things too much. Izuku had changed throughout time. He now has a spine and a backbone. He wasn't really that much of a sucker, therefore there was no way he'd allow a girl take advantage of him. Goddammit. Midoriya picked the scientific lab as a meeting place because the teachers allowed him to use it whenever he wanted. To be honest, he could never have diluted the trigger medicine without the science equipment provided by the school. Fortunately for him, no one seemed to really care about what he was doing, especially because he was using language and descriptions far beyond the comprehension of a junior high school student. It never occurred to him that he would find himself in a tight spot like this. "Do you know how hard it is to get you alone, Midoriya?" Suzume Kanjiro was a fellow student. She was a year older than he was, having been kept back following her initial quirk activation, which prevented her from being among people until she was able to control it to a moderate extent. Even still, her peculiarity prevented her from sitting close to either Kaken or Mitsuda. For one, she would become extremely agitated and irritated, and for the other, well, it was Mitsuda. "Can I help you, Suzume-san?" "You've ruined me," she murmured. I need you to take responsibility." Midoriya furrowed her brow. I don't understand. In the same lab, months ago, I told you to get help." She continued. You were fluctuating and controlling your emotions like someone just flipping dials on a machine and choosing whatever they wanted to be at any moment." "I see." Midoriya recalled. On that day, he operated on a frog to demonstrate to himself that he was capable of doing complicated surgery without any prior training. Suzume pointed to her chest and said, my quirk. You know what it is. It lets you feel the emotions of others. She sneered, empathy, that's the name. It's torture. I'm suppressing it and yet, I still feel people's emotions around me as though they were my own. If I don't suppress it, I'm bombarded with emotions of hundreds of people all at once, so much pain and anger and lust and hate, and she came to an end. And you that day, in this lab, you felt happiness. I felt happiness. I felt more happiness than I'd ever felt in my entire life. I felt more joy and bliss from you in those moments than I'd ever felt in my entire life. Izuku winced. I'm sorry. She spit at him, saying, I don't want your apology. I want to feel it again. I want to feel that happiness again. You set a new standard for what happiness feels like and it's a standard that is impossible to achieve. Not without drugs. Not without you. Izuku realized that things may go very wrong very quickly. I don't think it's a good idea. She angrily exclaimed, this is your fault. Yours. Yours. I don't care what you think, all I want is to feel that happiness again. Isn't that your thing? Isn't that your whole gimmick? Making people happy? Suzume laughed, you know my quirk is useless. I thought I could be a therapist, like my mother. She said it's not possible. My quirk it more than just lets me feel what others feel. It prevents me from forgetting the emotion. It amplifies the emotion because I'm vividly aware of it. So no, I won't be consoling anyone suffering from grief and heartbreak because I'll be too busy bawling my own eyes out. I won't be stopping someone who's depressed from killing themselves because I'll be too busy tying the noose around my own neck. Izuku experienced a sour taste in his mouth. He bit his lip and said, I can help you. What could he possibly say after I finish my scheme to purge the planet of eccentrics? Was he really going to say it like that? There were serious consequences to such a declaration. She sneered, once you what? I didn't come here for your pity, Midoriya. I can feel it, you know, right now. Your pity. It disgusts me. I don't care for it. I don't need it. Just give me what I need. Not because he didn't want to, but rather because he was aware of the potential consequences. He would practically become into her drug and she would turn into his junkie. With his peculiar precision quirk, he had significantly altered his own brain to enable him to tolerate high levels of feel-good hormone infusion. But she was not built as his intellect was. She couldn't suddenly switch between extremely high and extremely low points without suffering some harm. Suzume-san, I can't do what you're asking me. If I do what you're asking me, you'll come back and want more and on without any end in sight. So, what, you're saying I'll be addicted? Yes. I don't care. But I do. I care about what happens to you. She sneered. No you don't, she interrupted herself in mid-sentence. She gave him a 5-minute hard look while maintaining an attitude of skepticism. You actually, her eyebrows instantly furrowed. No, it's a trick. You're tricking me. Bastard. You're manipulating your emotions to make me believe that you actually care. Suzume-san, listen, I'm not. She unbuttoned her uniform without saying a word. Izuku's speech became unintelligible. What are you doing? She let her skirt fall and he closed his eyes like a gentleman. Suzume-san, please put your clothes back on. She declared, all men are the same. I know it. 'Cause I can feel it. I was 9 when I first felt lust and sexual desire fired at me. Because of my quirk, I felt it back in turn, lust and desire, things I didn't even understand. It's all most of you can think of. I feel it every day in class, all the time, boys just wanting nothing more than to tear girls' clothes off and stick their dicks into them. Teachers aren't even immune. Most keep their boundaries and never act on it, but the desire and lust is all the same. Izuku nearly choked on his own words. Most. She laughed once more, surprised. I could probably ruin some people's lives with what I know, but I don't. I'm not a bad person or a villain, Midoriya. I'm just like your friend, Mitsuda. You help him out, don't you? He's a walking ball of sexual desire. All he ever feels is the desire to fuck something or someone, and you don't judge him, do you? So don't judge me either for wanting this. We're just products of our shitty biology. You'll be addicted. Everyone is addicted to something, Midoriya, take it from me. Everyone. And many of us don't get to choose our addictions. Besides, it's not all bad to be addicted to happiness. I know you're not going to take advantage of me. If you were the type, you'd have done it already. He was hesitant. Pointing out details here. Midoriya was unsure of the morally correct course of action. She needed help badly, extremely badly. And this was just like assisting Mitsuda, wasn't it? Similar to when Mitsuda requested that he sketch that portrait, which he had done because Mitsuda was in need of his assistance. However, if she's hooked. No, everything was alright. He wasn't filthy. He was not going to exploit her. He would never act in such way. If anything, he would do all in his power to keep her secure and content. Was there really a valid cause for him to decline? Just this once they didn't both buy into those statements. Midoriya prepped his body by inhaling deeply and telling it to release the nice things. Dominance. The adrenaline. Oxytocin. Izuku let out a loud, contented laugh. He was baffled as to why this had disturbed him so much. Grinning, he opened his eyes. Suzume stood in front of him, her toes tingling as her lips expanded into a smile that rivaled and exceeded his own. "Oh, you lovely, wonderful, magnificent bastard." She walked over to him, put her hands on his cheeks, and gave him a passionate kiss on the lips. She laughed and spun as she let go of him with an exhale. Her response made Izuku giggle uncontrollably, and he became even more amused when he realized Suzume had technically just stolen his first kiss. Actually, he didn't mind because, well, she was gorgeous. Did you catch her smiling, too? That smile was very endearing. More valuable than its weight in silver or gold. Her joy was breathtaking to witness, and who gave a damn if it was artificial joy. All that mattered was that she was pleased and he was happy as well. She erupted into laughter, saying, "Oh my god, I feel like I can do anything. I feel invincible. This Midoriya, you're amazing. You're, oh my god. You're the best." She hopped, and Izuku's eyes caught sight of her topless state for the first time. And, come to think of it, bottomless. Moderately sized D cups were kept back by a basic black bra. There were also on similarly simple black pants. Midoriya laughed at it. Technically, it was the first time he had ever seen a girl in her panties. He had saw a nude girl, but he preferred not to consider the killer. Suzume was an actual female. A classmate who was a female he knew. Something happened that Midoriya's own mind was unaware of as he considered the idea. Not intentionally. His precision quirk, which mostly operated on autopilot, made sure that everything was operating exactly and that his mental processes were free from excess or default of any kind. The only occasion it did not function was when Midoriya decided to discontinue it and overindulge in happiness. Midoriya was 14 now. However, his precision quirk mostly prevented the normal puberty-related problems, including all the embarrassing horniness and sexual maturation. It ensured that Midoriya's brain was unlike that other boys his age, which inadvertently caused his sexual development to stagnate. But beneath his elevated state of bliss, precision faded and Midoriya experienced a novel, unsettling feeling that mixed with his exhilaration and contentment for the first time in his life. Suzume, with her peculiarity for empathy, also sensed it. The two teenagers laughed wildly and joyfully, but then their laughter subsided into gentle giggles as they stared intently into one another's eyes and remained silent. "Suzume-san. I." Before he could say another word, she kissed him. And that was when everything went horribly wrong. Midoriya had a jumbled thinking. He was going crazy. Trembling. She was 15, he was 14. Imagine if she were pregnant. How would he respond to his mum? What would she think? Then, would his dreams end? What about the dreams that Suzume had? How would she manage the responsibilities of a teenage mother? If he were a father who had to raise a child, could he still work towards his objective of eliminating idiosyncrasies from the world? Stop panicking. Midoriya was in a panic. Seriously, stop, I can feel all your anxiety from here and it's not helping the situation. Suzume-san, I swear I didn't mean to I would never take advantage he nibbled his lip. He pulled his face away from his hands, struggling to find words. What have I done? It's fine. No, it's not fine, we just he found it difficult to utter the words. Had a sexual encounter. For some reason, he found it difficult to say those words. Midoriya, it's fine. He looked over at her. After the initial elation subsided, he became aware of some fresh details. He thought there were a few differences. Now, Midoriya was perplexed to see her passively sitting on the ground and merely browsing through her phone. I don't understand. Midoriya, I used you. What? Next summer, my mother is taking me to America. A unique boarding school where individuals such as myself can fully conquer our eccentricities without having to worry about upholding them in day-to-day life. Before I departed, I felt I wanted to do one final thing at home that I would remember. She motioned for him to get her phone. When did she take the image that was there of him, nude inside her arms? So I chose to lose my virginity and have sex with the hottest guy from my junior high class. But Midoriya's eyes were fluttering. Everything you said I never lied outright, she declared. You've truly succeeded in creating a new benchmark for happiness. You've also raised the bar for enjoyment. Although your precision quirk told me I was going to be in for a treat, I don't think anyone could top what you did to me in the last hour. Why bother with the whole charade? If I'd just walked up to you and said, "Hey Midoriya-kun, you're cute, I'm leaving Japan, and I want to fuck you before I go," do you really think I'd have gotten anywhere? No. In fairness, Midoriya was pretty sure he would have taken off for the hills. The boy experienced strife. Bewildered. His nervousness subsided and was replaced by a somber, peculiar feeling of betrayal. It wasn't really me betraying you, yes, you are correct. She experienced all of his emotions. I mean, guys do this all the time, right? They get women to sleep with them, they will lie to them, tell them charming whispers, or tell them anything they want to hear. It's simply that there is. It's not like you were in a relationship with me or something, and you got laid. Thus, shouldn't you be I dunno happy? Midoriya was overwhelmed by a plethora of novel and intricate feelings that she was unsure of how to react to. All that was known to him was that he wasn't feeling well at the moment. He said, I thought I was helping you. How did you know your plan would work? In our entire class, you are the only boy who has never experienced any sexual feelings towards anyone. At first, I assumed you were just asexual, but following the lab incident, I understood that your peculiarity was what was preventing you from moving further. She looked at him like a sheep. Well, I guess you should be happy that you now know that at least. Imagine, for a moment, if you had believed your entire life that you lacked sex drive. Cease. Give up attempting to make it seem as though you helped me. She remarked, but I did do you a favor. You're no longer a virgin, you've learned that your quirk essentially makes you asexual, and you've learned not to always trust people like me who come at you with sob stories. Something flashed in Midoriya's mind, something he had never felt so vividly in his life. You're awful. Disgusting. Suzume winced. He would never know if it was from his unusual remarks or the fact that she could surely sense the same hatred he felt for her. I'm not a nasty person, Midoriya. You have to know what it's like to have a peculiarity like mine. My father's adultery was unintentionally revealed to me, which led to our parents' divorce. I am privy to some filthy and repulsive secrets that I am not allowed to share. I can tell when my so-called pals are jealous of me, despise me, or wish to kill me. I travel everywhere and have fast access to people's opinions of me and their needs. You have no idea how life is when you live it this way. Should this peculiarity not have been innate in me, your quirk is responsible for a lot, but it isn't responsible for this. She chewed the inside of her lower lip. Simple for you to state. You're the weird man who gets away with anything. You have no idea how it feels to be me. You ought to feel appreciative. Midoriya, you're a moron. Gullible. You have no idea how the actual world functions. Take a look at you. You're this incredibly attractive person with this great eccentricity who has no idea how far up on the social scale he is. The rest of us who were not as fortunate at birth had it this way. It's as simple as this. To acquire what they desire, people trick each other, put on masks and pretend emotions, and fool one another. The only thing that separates you and me is that, although I struggle to reach the top, all you need to do is smile to be taken to the summit via an expedited lift. Midoriya was silent for a while. Silently, he put on his clothes and slung his rucksack over his shoulders. She screamed at him, stop it. Put an end to that emotion. I detest it. I detest it. Put an end to it. I'm not a nasty guy. If it had been my turn, you would have done the same. The sex was fantastic, so please don't feel as though I did you any harm. Do you believe you didn't? She remained silent. Unable to respond. If Midoriya Izuku had an answer, she didn't care to wait for it. The second drawer on the left contains the lab keys. Kindly ensure that the doors are locked once you've left. Shutting the door behind him, he stealthily started walking home. Day of the entrance exams for UA Academy. Izuku drew calm breaths as he got closer to the entryway. No matter where he went, other nominees would, as he had imagined, point, whisper, and cast a quick glance at him. He now understood that the hushed comments were either done out of envy or admiration, and the reddening of cheeks was a reaction to his alleged physical attractiveness. Shallow, he was astounded by how superficial everything was. Shocked him. He hadn't made the decision to acquire silky hair and a face with perfect symmetry for himself. His peculiarity did. Izuku was starting to get tired of it. Hated. Hated. He found himself staring at his own reflection in the mirror, but if individuals like Suzume were any indication, he was someone others would give their right arm and leg to be around. Oi Izuku, you okay? Izuku looked across at his companion. Kaken. Yes, he was friends with Kaken. Since he'd changed in appearance, Kaken hadn't treated him any differently. In spite of their physical differences, Kaken treated him the same. However, there was a voice in the back of Izuku's mind informing him that this was also due to his quirk. Would he and Kaken still be together now if his quirk had never appeared? Would Kaken regard him as an equal, as he did this morning? Izuku hated his own peculiarity even more after discovering the solution to that. He detested his peculiarity. He detested peculiarities. Curiosities, peculiarities, peculiarities, peculiarities. All the world ever discussed was that. People's prejudice and animosity stemmed from that. That served as an excuse for people to commit wrongdoing. That was the cause of all of humanity's pain and suffering. Izuku detested eccentricities. I'm fine. His answer came. Let's get this over with. Kaken looked at him strangely, but didn't ask any questions. We're at various testing facilities. I am on my way up to mine. So you try your hardest. The mere words were enough to nearly shatter his world. Izuku blinked and looked at Kaken as though he had two heads. Kaken. Did you just inspire me without using profanity? The boy gave a bark. What? No. Screw it. Perish. Consume crap. Kaken, it's too late. It was audible to me. I heard it, but I don't think it's true. Well, whatever. You had better do well on this test. Izuku, fuck off. Master it. If your name isn't better than all the other cannon fodder, I won't take it. Izuku stood there quietly grinning to himself as the boy stormed out. After all, Kaken is still Kaken. His gut warned him of someone approaching, so he sidestepped and avoided someone who fell and hit the ground next to him. The girl with dark hair mumbled something under her breath and let her luggage fall to the ground. Izuku hesitated before moving to assist her. She nearly ran into me out of all the people here. Was it intentional, or is it just a coincidence? This meeting seems so corny, like something from a shoujo comic by Mitsuda. It was a suspicious situation. He had doubts. And yet, in spite of that moment of doubt, he found himself walking forward. With one hand, he grabbed the girl's luggage and motioned with the other. Are you okay? The brunette had fair complexion, and her cheeks were always flushed. But big, large eyes and warm brown eyes, she had thick upper lashes, two longer, more pronounced ones jutting forth on either side, and fewer, more pronounced bottom lashes. Her hair was shoulder length and roughly the same color as her eyes. It was bobbed and curved inward at the ends, with two longer clumps on either side of her face that had the same form and short fringe that hung down her forehead about a fourth of the way. She held up her hand and Izuku's eyes followed. Oh thank yo, she possessed little pink pads on the top inner segment of each finger, somewhat of like a cat or dog's toe. Stranger related. The girl glanced at him for the first time as her outstretched hand met his. Izuku was irritated, of course, as soon as he saw how red her face had become. Her eyes were no longer able to meet his. She had turned her back on him. She was not seeing Midoriya Izuku, instead, she was seeing a boy that she thought was cute for a teenage lad. In an official tone, he continued, please be careful the next time to avoid tripping and properly clasp your bags so as to prevent the contents from spilling. Why yes, thank you, she stammered and was still unable to look him in the eye. Hardly give him a look. A fresh stab of annoyance struck Midoriya. I ought to get a mask. He was sick of being noticed but not appreciated. Was he ever so vapid in his pursuit of beauty? No. Never. He couldn't remember the last time he'd felt someone was excessively gorgeous to the point where he would freeze and hardly meet their eyesight. He almost clicked his tongue as he left, saying nothing further to the girl. It made no difference. Not right now. It was now imperative that he devote all of his attention to passing the exams, nothing else mattered. Sorry, I didn't get your name. The young woman yelled at him. It surprised Midoriya. Was it that he was no longer in close proximity? No, it wasn't. When she got closer, the girl did look him in the eyes. Midoriya, spoken. Midoriya Izuku. Clearly stating, I'm Uraraka, she spoke. Uraraka Chako. Though she still stammered a little at first, Izuku could tell she was trying. That was something he could respect. She bowed and said, thank you, Midoriya-san, for helping me. And, she said, pumping her hand high. Do your best. A long-lost smile began to quiver across Midoriya's lips. Likewise, Uraraka-san. I'm hoping you give it your all. Thanks for watching guys, that's it for today, so hope you enjoyed this video. If you do, please leave a like, share and subscribe.